Chapter 2973. Bang! A loud sound was heard. That bloody mouth was finally repelled by Yi Shiwen. It revealed its true body at this time. It turned out to be a chaos python. It was unknown how many thousands of miles long it was in the chaos. Just its head was as huge as a mountain. Its entire body was unknown how many thousands of miles long it was. Even Yi Shiwen couldn't help but be slightly moved. Such a huge creature had actually grown in the chaos. Only the Emperor Lords could move freely in the chaos. However, this didn't mean that there weren't any other creatures. On the contrary, some of the creatures living in the chaos had even formed groups. Ordinary creatures of the chaos naturally couldn't pose any threat to Yi Shiwen given his cultivation. However, this chaos python was more than enough to deal with him. The attack of the Emperor Lords could collapse mountains, shatter stars, and collapse the world. However, this chaos python was able to withstand Yi Shiwen's attack. One could well imagine how powerful it was. Yi Shiwen would have thought of catching one if it weren't for the fact that it was a creature born in the primal chaos. It could be said that the strength of the divine court would have increased by a large margin out of thin air if such a powerful creature was keeping watch over it. Roar! The chaos python let out a shocking roar after it was repelled. The entire chaos was stirred up like the waves of the sea. It surged up and down, and layer after layer of waves crazily shook. Yi Shiwen suddenly understood that this python hadn't come at the right time. In fact, it should have been guarding this yellow middle plum for a long time, if he wasn't mistaken. Heavenly treasures must be guarded by powerful creatures. This law was applicable even in the primal chaos. This chaos python could also sense Yi Shiwen's strength. Therefore, it was only roaring from afar. However, it obviously didn't want to give up on the yellow middle plum. It was just staring at it from afar. It seemed that it would attack once it had the chance. Bastard, you leave now. I won't harm your life. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. Yi Shiwen said coldly. He had already sensed that many creatures with powerful auras were rushing over. It was unknown how many powerful creatures of the chaos had been born in this primal chaos. It was said that the 3,000 devil gods that had created the world were creatures that had lived in the primal chaos. After they had fallen in the creation of the world, they had been absorbed by the world and transformed into the 3,000 great Taos. Those legendary chaos demon gods even dared to challenge the Emperor Lords. They had the strength of the Emperor Lords. However, that was only a legend. After all, it was unknown how many years had passed since the creation of the world. Many things could only become legends. Even if this chaos python wasn't as powerful as the legendary chaos fiend celestial, it wasn't much weaker. If it really swallowed the yellow middle plum, it would really attain the Tao and grow to an unimaginable level. Yi Shiwen immediately understood that he had become a calamity in the life of this chaos python. If he could overcome it, he would naturally become immeasurable. However, if he failed, he was afraid that he would be in danger of dying. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but grin when he understood that he had inadvertently become a tool. No wonder he suddenly felt the treasure light and smelled that fragrance from so far away. However, no matter what the situation was, since he had seen it, he naturally couldn't let it go. It was precisely because of this that Yi Shiwen felt compassion in his heart and decided to let him live. However, the chaos python obviously didn't appreciate it. It just stared coldly at Yi Shiwen. The deafening roars even caused the heavens and earth to shake violently. Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. If you want to die, then continue. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and began to become unhappy. You're courting death by snatching my yellow middle plum. I'm going to swallow you. Although the chaos python couldn't speak, it transmitted such a message through its will. Obviously, its spiritual wisdom wasn't fully developed yet. Otherwise, it would have understood the severity of the situation. You're very powerful. If I swallow you, I will be able to completely complete my transformation. This chaos will no longer be able to bind me. You're courting death. Yi Shiwen's eyes brightened. With his current status, who would dare to say in front of him that they would swallow him? Roar! The chaos python attacked again. With a loud roar, its huge body pounced towards Yi Shiwen at an unimaginable speed. Countless primal chaos rolled up in an instant, causing his figure to be faintly discernible within it. Bang! Yi Shiwen raised his hand and blocked the attack of the chaos python again. Roar! The chaos python instantly transformed into a middle-aged man with scales all over his body. He held a huge sword in his hand and slashed towards Yi Shiwen. Boom! The chaos was split apart. It was going to kill Yi Shiwen in one blow. Yi Shiwen could see through it at a glance. This sword should be the transformation of the chaos python's entire body. It was extremely terrifying. It was much more powerful than any divine weapon. If an emperor who had just attained Tao not long ago encountered this guy, he might not be in life-threatening danger. However, he would still suffer a little. If it was the NID who encountered this beast, he would definitely suffer a little. Unfortunately, the person he encountered was Yi Shiwen. What kind of person was Yi Shiwen? He sneered. Suddenly, bursts of golden light burst out of his hands. Then, he directly caught the sneak attack of the sword with his bare hands. A look of disbelief flashed in the figure's eyes. He didn't expect this outsider to be so powerful. He could even catch the sword that his body had transformed into. He had encountered some chaotic creatures in the past, but none of them were as powerful as Yi Shiwen. At this moment, he realized that this guy in front of him wasn't someone to be trifled with. In fact, he was extremely terrifying. However, his spiritual wisdom hadn't fully developed yet. Although he sensed the danger, he still continued to attack Yi Shiwen. Stubborn fool! Yi Shiwen snorted coldly. He exerted his strength and instantly pinched it. However, the chaos python let out a blood-curdling screech. The chaos python's mouth was crushed on the spot. One must know that this was an illusion formed from its body. One could imagine how terrifying it would be if it was crushed by Yi Shiwen. The chaos python screamed and wanted to escape. At this moment, it was already scared to death by Yi Shiwen. It didn't dare to stay any longer. However, how could Yi Shiwen give it a chance to escape? The Avicii sword appeared in his hand. With a slash, this powerful body that could survive in the chaos was split into pieces on the spot. The Avicii sword aura was thousands of miles long. With one slash, the chaos python was split into two. Even though it had transformed into its real body, it was still split into two. His primordial spirit was completely destroyed in an instant. Killing this beast with one slash was not difficult at all. This slash startled the chaos. It also scared the chaotic creatures that were rushing over. Although the yellow middle plum was very attractive to them, this slash still scared them. This slash gave them a sense of extreme danger. At this moment, these chaotic creatures still knew what was good for them. Yi Shiwen smiled slightly. To a large extent, he didn't hold back and attacked with all his strength just now. He wanted to scare these chaotic creatures away to avoid unnecessary trouble. He simply started to refine this giant python in front of the yellow middle plum. Anyway, the yellow middle plum still needed some time to mature. Otherwise, it wouldn't be Yi Shiwen's turn. Instead, it would have been swallowed by this chaos python. With Yi Shiwen's skill, it was not difficult to refine this chaos python. It didn't take long for this python, which had once run amok in the Bell of Chaos, to be completely refined by Yi Shiwen into a treasured armor and a treasured sword. Although they were not as good as Dao tools, they were not far off in terms of power. The only thing they lacked was to integrate his own Dao into them. Yi Shiwen had named these two divine tools Chaotic Python Armor and Green Light Sword. Therefore, it was quite easy to use them since he had refined them himself. They weren't inferior to the Avicii sword. However, they were naturally inferior in terms of power. After Yi Shiwen refined the Chaos Python, the yellow middle plum had also matured. Although the yellow middle plum kept colliding with the space barrier in the process, it was useless in the end. In the end, Yi Shiwen forcibly grabbed the yellow middle plum and thoroughly refined and subdued its spiritual wisdom. The whole process was much more complicated than subduing the enlightening mind ancient tree. However, the ferocity of the yellow middle plum couldn't be compared with that of the enlightening mind ancient tree. Yi Shiwen received the yellow middle plum into his inner world and lived next to the enlightening mind ancient tree. The first thing Yi Shiwen did was to pluck a plum from the yellow middle plum and swallow it into his stomach. The moment Yi Shiwen swallowed the yellow middle plum, it immediately turned into a pure surging martial power and spread throughout his limbs and bones. Such pure energy! Yi Shiwen couldn't help but be very surprised. One must know that ordinary heavenly treasures were no longer of any use to him when his cultivation had reached this level. It was impossible for them to increase his cultivation. However, he felt that his cultivation, which had stagnated for many years, had taken a step forward by swallowing this yellow middle plum. This should be the fortuitous encounter and opportunity that the Demon King had mentioned. Yi Shiwen nodded with satisfaction. Sure enough, it was useless to cultivate in seclusion. Only such a fortuitous encounter could make his cultivation progress in a short time. Yi Shiwen didn't continue to practice after he had thoroughly refined this yellow middle plum. After all, the primal chaos wasn't a good place to practice. After all, he didn't know how many powerful creatures of the primal chaos were eyeing him covetously. Chapter 29:74. After swallowing a yellow middle plum, Yi Shiwen did not stop, but continued to move forward into the chaos. He found some good things one after another. Some were even relatively rare divine materials, which had only appeared once or twice since ancient times. However, compared to the previous harvest of yellow middle plum and colorful living soil, it was nothing. However, this was normal in the primal chaos. All kinds of divine materials were scattered in the primal chaos. So, it was impossible for them to gather together. Yi Shiwen had been able to find divine materials so frequently because there hadn't been an Emperor Realm expert in the 10,000 worlds in recent years. Otherwise, they would have already been found by the predecessors. These divine materials that Yi Shiwen found were mostly divine materials that had been bred in the heavens over these years. And those who became Emperor Realm after Yi Shiwen were going to cry. After Yi Shiwen entered the chaos twice, it was really hard to say how many were left. As the saying goes, first come, first served. Those who are fast will get it, and those who are fast won't get it. This was the logic. Just like that, he'd obtained over 100 divine materials, and he'd practically collected all the divine materials that had been nurtured in the primal chaos after the Qin Emperor. Of course, it was not that there were no divine materials further away, but if he wanted to find them, he had to go deeper into the chaos. However, the further away from the heavens, the more unstable the chaos was. In other words, the more dangerous it was. Even super creatures like the chaos python would appear more and more. It could be said that the further away from the heavens, the more dangerous it would be. Even the Emperor Realm would be in danger. At that time, if he wanted to get a divine tool, the price he had to pay would increase exponentially. And just as Yi Shiwen was searching for many divine materials in the chaos, hundreds of years had passed in the blink of an eye. Originally, hundreds of years in any case was not a long time. However, for the heavens, earth-shaking changes had taken place. Because the long and despairing period of the heavenly law, which had lasted from the Second War against the heavens to the present, had finally passed. The moment the period of the heavenly law disappeared, all the peak quasi-emperors who had really touched that level felt the disappearance of the heavenly law because they felt that the barrier that seemed to be impossible to break had suddenly become a lot weaker. Of course, it didn't mean that they would be able to charge in even if it was much weaker, but at least it wouldn't be as solid as before. The more one stayed in this realm, the more one could feel how difficult it was to make a breakthrough. And the fact that Yi Shiwen was able to make a breakthrough under such circumstances made him even more terrifying. Since ancient times, aside from the great Qin Emperor, only the current martial emperors had managed to become martial emperors while imprisoned. But now that the confinement period was over, the risk of them becoming emperors was much smaller. There wouldn't be a terrifying scene like Yi Shiwen becoming an emperor again. In fact, the comparison was very obvious. Everyone also felt that DNI had become an emperor, but compared to Yi Shiwen's emperor ascension, it paled in comparison. Sure enough, there were strong and weak emperors. For a moment, The entire universe seemed to have sunk into complete silence, entering a state of slumber. This was because everyone had entered a state of frenzied cultivation. All the experts who had reached the peak of the quasi-emperor realm were attempting to break through to the sovereign emperor realm. And those who hadn't reached it were also madly cultivating, hoping to catch up. Everyone was very clear that what was coming next was a real great era, a great era where emperors emerged in large numbers. If there was no way to become an emperor, there would be no right to speak at all. Whether it was for oneself, for the inheritance, for the race, for everything else, they had to find a way to break through. This was the best opportunity since ancient times. If they missed this opportunity, there might not be another chance. Because according to various rumors, the number of emperors in the world was limited. Once the number reached a certain number, the world would restrain the sovereign emperor realm. At that time, it would be almost impossible to break through unless one had the strength of the Great Qin Emperor or the Martial Emperor. Didn't you see that there were only two such monsters in the past tens of thousands of years? In other words, the following period of time would truly determine the outcome of the battle. Many of the old antiques had existed since the Second War of Resistance against the heavens. For this moment, they had already given their all. Under such circumstances, the originally stable situation in the past few years became even more stable. Even the burden of the divine court, which had always been in charge of arbitration, had become much lighter. In recent years, they had also devoted more energy to cultivation. Although not everyone in the divine court was qualified to aspire to the throne, there were still quite a few who had truly reached the peak of the quasi-emperor realm and were qualified to break through to that supreme realm. This strange situation continued for another 1,000 years. Finally, something changed. Someone began to undergo a tribulation. This person's tribulation immediately attracted everyone's attention. Although the pressure of the heavenly Tao produced during the tribulation could not be hidden from others, this person was undergoing the tribulation in a secret realm. Therefore, others could only vaguely guess from the strength of the tribulation. They could not really see who exactly was undergoing the tribulation. Everyone was watching. Finally, someone was willing to take the lead. Not only did he help everyone to ascertain the strength of the heavenly tribulation after the end of the confinement period, but he was also testing the intentions of that person in the divine court. Although the confinement period was now over, everyone understood that the confinement period was only the first big trouble in order to become an emperor. The second big trouble was Martial Emperor Yi Shiwen himself. What if Yi Shiwen did not want others to become emperor? Then, there was no doubt that anyone who tried to become an emperor under his nose might be met with a blow from him. Although this possibility was not great, after all, judging from Yi Shiwen's willingness to preach to everyone, he did not seem to oppose them becoming emperor. He was certainly not that narrow-minded. However, this kind of thing was hard to say. No one was willing to take such a risk. It was not until the news that Yi Shiwen had left the divine court and entered the primal chaos spread that everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Without such a huge shadow pressing down on their heads, they dared to try something that they had not dared to try before. Under the attention of everyone, this person finally succeeded in crossing the heavenly tribulation. Although it seemed that he had almost failed based on the situation of the heavenly tribulation, he succeeded in the end. Success, success. The second emperor has finally appeared. Oh my God, the long confinement period is finally over. I thought I could not wait any longer. Finally, someone dares to eat crabs. It seems that the martial emperor is not so narrow-minded. Come to think of it, what kind of person is he? It is not an exaggeration to say that he is an emperor throughout the ages. How could he do something that would ruin the future of others? Is the era of heroes vying for supremacy finally coming? Many people burst into tears. Even if they had an iron heart, they still could not help but burst into tears when they saw the long-awaited day. Needless to say, the benefits of the era of the emperors would naturally be restored to an unprecedented state of prosperity. The benefits that one emperor could bring were simply innumerable, not to mention the reigning of multiple emperors. From ancient times to the present, It was clear from many cases that the era when there were many sovereigns and emperors was the strongest and most prosperous era in the myriad of worlds. However, just when everyone thought that the era of the emperors was about to enter the era of the emperors, a change finally occurred. The person who succeeded in crossing the heavenly tribulation finally revealed his true identity. He was actually the survivor of the netherworld kingdom that had been annihilated previously. He was the only super genius who had escaped. The person who crossed the heavenly tribulation was actually the underworld lord. Soon more news came. It turned out that the underworld lord had already escaped before the netherworld kingdom was attacked. This was to preserve the seed of hope. In the end, no one expected him to succeed. The underworld lord had become an emperor. Underworld emperor had always been very clear that when Yi Shiwen invaded the netherworld kingdom, he would be the first target to be killed. Everyone could escape, but he could not. Only when he was dead, Yi Shiwen would not continue to pursue the escaped underworld lord. Otherwise, the underworld lord would not be able to escape from Yi Shiwen's pursuit. Now it seemed that underworld emperor's plan should be considered successful. No one knew what resources underworld emperor had left behind before sending him away. It actually allowed the underworld lord to be the first to become an emperor after the confinement period. Obviously, it was not bad. After the underworld lord became an emperor, he quickly set off shocking waves. Relying on the unique cultivation techniques of the netherworld kingdom, he gathered an undead army. Moreover, as time passed, more and more places were breached by underworld emperor. The undead army under the underworld lord was like a rolling snowball, getting bigger and bigger. Soon, it formed a huge army that swept towards the heavens and the myriad realms. It was different from the elite armies of the netherworld kingdom back then. Clearly, this army looked more like a motley crew. Under the leadership of the survivors of the netherworld kingdom who had escaped back then, it looked majestic. However, in order to avoid the attention of the heavens and the myriad realms, the netherworld kingdom took the route of elite soldiers. Although their military strength was not as strong as it was now, almost all of them were top-notch experts. Just the number of quasi-emperor level experts alone was unknown. The more experts that were buried, the stronger their strength would be. It was completely different from the current situation where they were forcefully revived and could not display much of their strength when they were alive. In this aspect, the underworld lord did not seem to care. It was more like he was taking revenge. He drove this huge, undead army all the way in the direction of the divine court. Everyone understood that the underworld lord wanted to take revenge on the great enmity that Yi Shiwen had led an army to destroy the netherworld kingdom back then. He also wanted to destroy the divine court. However, it was not possible without a sufficient army. Therefore, he conveniently destroyed other forces, killed them, and turned them into an undead army. Those forces that were destroyed and massacred could be said to have taken the blame for the divine court. However, the unscrupulous actions of the underworld lords still aroused the anger of the myriad realms. Chapter 2975. There was a very important reason why the various clans followed Yi Shiwen to destroy the netherworld kingdom previously. It was because they were afraid that the netherworld kingdom would sweep the world and turn the heavens and realms into a kingdom of death. Now, their original worries had become reality. Sure enough, if the people of the netherworld kingdom were to gain power, it would be a huge disaster for the heavens and realms. But this time, the underworld lord was determined to take revenge. He swept all the way and rushed in the direction of the divine court. The major forces of various clans were not his opponents at all. The mighty undead army was too huge. Once they died in battle, they would be revived with a special secret technique. Even if they could not recover 100% of their combat power, just a little bit of combat power was enough to be terrifying. In addition, there was the underworld lord in the middle army. The experts of the allied forces of various clans did not have an advantage at all. Under the rapid march of the underworld lord, it could be said that they were defeated all the way. They were constantly retreating in the direction of the divine court. In the face of such a situation, It was impossible for the divine court to remain indifferent as the leader of the emperor's inheritance in the heavens and realms. Moreover, this undead army was coming for the divine court. Naturally, it was impossible for them to stay out of it. However, even if the divine court dispatched the army, there was still no way to stop the advancement of the undead army. This was because the underworld lord would intervene from time to time. Once the underworld lord intervened, the army would be useless no matter how strong it was. The premise that the emperor's inheritance could resist the expedition of an emperor was that it was inside the inheritance. Once the inheritance was out, the emperor was still the most tyrannical. In just 10 years, this undead army had already swept the world and reached the door of the divine court. For a time, the entire heavens and realms were in a state of panic. In particular, the martial emperor Yi Shiwen, whom everyone had high hopes for, did not appear. Even when he was being attacked, he still did not appear. This made many people have bad thoughts. If Yi Shiwen was only in close cultivation, perhaps no one would be so rebellious. However, Yi Shiwen had entered the chaos. All the major inheritances had records about the chaos. Except for the emperor, no one dared to really go deep into the chaos. However, even the emperor was in danger. Since ancient times, there were many emperors who had entered the chaos and returned with serious injuries. This proved that there were indeed terrifying creatures in the primal chaos that could threaten emperors. Under such circumstances, Yi Shiwen hadn't returned for a long time. This made many people's imagination run wild. Especially in the past few years, under the arrangement of the Dark Lord, all kinds of rumors that Yi Shiwen had fallen in the primal chaos were simply endless. Even many people of the Divine Palace believed it. Even if they believed in Yi Shiwen, the dangers in the primal chaos were well known to everyone in the universe. Therefore, under such circumstances, it was hard to say whether Yi Shiwen had suffered serious injuries or not. In any case, it was a fact that Yi Shiwen wasn't here at this time. Under such a grim situation, Yi Shiwen couldn't be counted on for the time being. Many people had set their sights on those who were qualified to become emperors. If they became emperors, they would be able to stop the Dark Lord. Corpse calamity. This was the true corpse calamity. It was a calamity of corpses that engulfed almost half of the universe. And the one who caused this calamity was an imperial emperor-level figure. Since ancient times, it had always been like this. As long as it could cause a disaster that shook the universe, it would be like this. Even if ordinary peak emperor-level figures wanted to cause trouble, they would have been killed in minutes. Soon, this army had really killed their way to the mountain gate of the Divine Palace. However, the current Divine Palace was already different from tens of thousands of years ago. It could be said that there were many experts and deep foundations. Even if they were killed in front of the mountain gate, they didn't seem to be dispirited. In particular, the various trump cards that Yi Shiwen had left behind finally emerged at this time. As the inheritance of an emperor-level figure, the foundation of the Divine Palace was indeed much deeper than others. Rumble. Outside the Divine Palace, it had completely turned into a battlefield. The original Jade Stairs had long been destroyed in the flames of war. Countless experts were fighting here, and the army of the undead didn't know fatigue. They just rushed forward and killed. This was the most terrifying thing, because for them, they didn't know what death was, and they didn't have any spiritual wisdom at all. The Dark Lord had paid a huge price to forcibly revive these corpses. These corpses also didn't have the spiritual wisdom of the original experts of the Dark Kingdom. They almost only acted according to their instincts. In the Divine Palace, countless formations were activated one after another. There were also a few Emperor-level formations that Yi Shiwen had left behind. Terrifying attacks swept out, and every time they swept out, a large number of the undead army would be wiped out. Even in the distance, there were war fortresses showing their might. Energy waves swept across the sky, fell into the army of the undead, and completely annihilated them. Huge war beasts that were as huge as stars rushed back and forth, trampling the sky. Countless undead army were completely swept into ashes by the shock waves formed by the trampling before they could even get close. However, the army of the undead was too large, filling the entire universe. No matter how the divine palace fought, and even used forbidden methods, the line of defense was still in danger. The Dark Lord didn't come straight to the divine palace because he wanted to collect these cannon fodder. Now, these cannon fodder were continuously consuming the foundation of the divine palace, and sooner or later, the divine palace would collapse. No matter how many cannon fodder were destroyed, the Dark Lord wouldn't even blink. Today, the Emperor will trample the divine palace. Don't even think about escaping. Even Yishuin can't save you. The Netherlord's cruel and cold voice reverberated. It was like a heavy blow to the hearts of the people of the divine palace, almost crushing their minds. Bulsh *T. A loud shout came from the divine palace. When the martial emperor returns, it will be the death of a clown like you. Even your master died in the hands of the martial emperor. What qualifications do you have to say these words? Yemo suddenly flew out, and the Tianyuan mirror in his hand burst out bursts of blood-red light, directly sweeping out like a laser, cutting half of the sky. The undead army that was swept by the light directly turned into atoms and disappeared without a trace. The power of the Tianyuan mirror as a Dao tool finally broke out completely. At this time, the Tianyuan mirror was no longer in a damaged state and had already been repaired by Yi Shiwen over the years with the divine materials of the heavens. It was even more powerful than an ordinary Dao tool. At this time, the ferocious power of the Tianyuan mirror finally fully manifested, simply burying the heavens together with it. It was very terrifying. Humph, it's just a stubborn resistance, like a cornered beast fighting. The Dark Lord didn't have the slightest fear towards EMO. If he was still at the peak of the quasi-emperor realm, perhaps he would have to be careful when he encountered EMO, but now he had become an emperor. There was naturally no need to mention the huge gap between the emperor and the quasi-emperor. Rumble! In another direction, Yi Qianqian attacked, and the huge devil ship swept across the sky, rampaging through the undead army. No one could stop it, and it was almost completely crushed. And on the bow of the huge devil ship, Yi Qianqian was wearing the underworld's saint clothes and constantly attacked. Masses of death power swept out and cut the heavens and the earth into countless black and white squares, and the undead within the squares died tragically one after another. In addition to Yi Qianqian and Yi Mo, the other peak quasi-emperors of the divine court also attacked one after another. These old antiques were battle-hardened, and although they didn't have a Dao tool to protect themselves, they were still quite strong in terms of strength. They rushed and killed in the undead army and swept in all directions. Originally, there weren't any powerful existences among these undead. At most, there were some remnants of the Netherworld kingdom mixed in with them, but they didn't amount to much. The most terrifying thing was the endless number of undead. In addition to this endless number, there was also the Dark Lord, an expert of the Emperor King level, holding the fort. This was just like when Yi Shiwen had led the army of the myriad heavens to destroy the Netherworld kingdom back then, and there was almost no end to them. But even with these experts, the various defensive lines of the divine court were still in danger, and there was a possibility that they would collapse. Dong! An incomparably loud sound of a bell rang out. Along with this sound, ripples swept across the sky and rushed into the army of undead. It was unknown how many tens of thousands of undead were instantly swept to ashes by this attack. Then, another yin-yang diagram of life and death flew out, and the diagram of the two extremes of yin and yang flew into the undead army and began a frenzied massacre. The undead army was crushed by the yin-yang diagram of life and death and turned into ashes. Heavenly Court, the Heavenly Court's army has come to support. How could the people of the Divine Court not understand what was happening? Naturally, the Heavenly Court had made a move. Because of the relationship between Yi Shiwen, Yi Wudi, and Young Kuan Peng, the relationship between the Divine Court and the Heavenly Court was also very good. At this time, when the Divine Court was in danger, the first to take action was naturally the Heavenly Court's army. Sure enough, almost after a few breaths, a mighty army appeared in the distance, led by an extremely luxurious 9 dragons chariot. Two figures stood side by side. But who else could it be but Yi Wudi and young Kuan-pung? Lord of the Heavenly Court, Yi Wudi, and Demon Master Kuan-pung have come to support. After a loud shout, Yi Wudi and young Kuan-pung flew out immediately, controlling the Demon Emperor's bell and the yin-yang diagram of life and death, and slaughtered into the undead army. With the addition of this new force from the Heavenly Court, everyone from the Divine Court felt a jolt in their hearts. As expected, the Heavenly Court was still the most reliable at this moment. Everyone was even more confident that they could stop the Dark Lord now. Walalala! At the same time, from the south, a sea of fire spread over, burning countless undead into ashes in an instant. A beautiful figure followed the sea of fire and slaughtered into the undead army. Chapter 2976. This figure swept away everything in its path. It was none other than Hua Menghan. Hua Menghan was wearing a phoenix robe. He was standing above a sea of fire. The law of fire was revolving around his body. He was jumping up and down in excitement. He looked like a fire spirit. Wherever Hua Menghan passed, no undead could resist. Even if there were some remnants of the Nether Kingdom who tried to stop him, they were burned to ashes in an instant. In the absence of an emperor, a Tao weapon was almost equivalent to a nuclear weapon. Even a quasi-emperor would not be able to stop it, let alone others. Behind Hua Menghan, there was also a mighty army. It was as if the world was burning red. This was the army of the ancient Phoenix realm, led by Hua Menghan, who had come to support the Divine Court. It's the ancient Phoenix realm. Even the ancient Phoenix realm has come. This time, we will be able to stop this army of the undead. Many experts of the Divine Court were completely relieved at this time. With the reinforcements of 2 emperors' inheritances, no matter how tyrannical the army of the Nether Kingdom was, they would not be able to win. Dark Lord, you have crossed the line. You want to use death to replace living beings. You are crazy. There was another cold voice. A huge palace descended from the sky. Countless divine birds followed the palace and rushed down, smashing the undead into pieces. A fiery red figure appeared in the sky. It was none other than a mortal fire dragon. At this time, the martial arts great sect army finally came to support, and the Phoenix Palace took the lead, killing countless undead. The martial arts great sect army also swept over under the guidance of the Phoenix Palace. Boom! A shocking sword chi tore through the sky, cutting through half of the world, and blasted into the army of the undead. Wherever the sword chi passed, the army of the undead was completely vaporized. A long sword flew across the sky. Its golden color carried an unparalleled might as it swept out. This is the Taiya sword. It really is the Taiya sword. This means that the Emperor clan, Ji clan, has also come. Some people of the Divine Court recognized the sword at a glance. After the Taiya sword, the army of the Imperial clan, the Ji family, followed. In terms of the most powerful lineage in the world, with the deepest foundation, it was probably the Imperial clan, the Ji family. Furthermore, they had so many Imperial emperors laying down their foundations. Soon, the reinforcements from all sides arrived. After the Emperor clan, the 8 royal clans of the Demon clan also came with their elites. The Dragon Island and other ancient emperors' inheritances finally came. They gathered in the Divine Court, intending to completely ambush the army of the undead in the Divine Court. Although the Dark Lord intended to take revenge on the Divine Court, if they were not stopped, the army of the undead would sweep the entire world. If that happened, the entire world would become the land of the Nether Kingdom, and they would be slaughtered by the undead. The Divine Court could. Moreover, if they did not do their best to support the Divine Court now, how would they explain the situation when Yi Shiwen returned in the future? For a moment, the entire battlefield was filled with Tao artifacts. Many of them had never seen so many Imperial Lord-level Tao artifacts being used together in their entire lives. Any one of the Tao artifacts possessed the power to obliterate the world. Now that so many of them were used together, the might they could unleash was simply unimaginable. The vast army of departed spirits was quickly reduced to a visible number. All forces finally heaved a sigh of relief. Under the situation where everyone joined forces, even the army of the undead, which was said to be endless, could not hold on. After all, they were all cannon fodder. If the elites of the Nether Kingdom had such a scale, all forces would not be able to hold on. Cannon fodder was just cannon fodder. However, everyone was most concerned about the situation of the Dark Lord. At this time, only the Emperor clan, the Dark Lord, could truly turn the situation around. Sure enough, under such circumstances, the Dark Lord could not just watch the army of the undead be defeated. He directly took action. Countless power of death condensed into a giant hand of death and slammed down on the divine court. Rumble! The huge and terrifying power caused the entire divine court to tremble violently. Countless arrays were completely reduced to ashes by this attack. A huge hole instantly appeared in the defenses of the divine court. Oh no! He wants to break into the divine court directly. At this time, Yemo immediately roared. He immediately understood what Hades' Emperor was trying to do. While everyone was pacing back and forth on the battlefield, he wanted to break into the divine court in one fell swoop and kill all the disciples in the divine court. If he really succeeded, then even if the divine court could survive this battle, they would probably suffer heavy losses. Damn it, how despicable! Yi Qianqian wanted to return to help, but it was too late. The giant hand slammed into the divine court's defenses, constantly clawing at the arrays. Many of the divine court disciples hiding in the arrays could not dodge in time and were crushed into a bloody mist on the spot. On the sacred mountain, in the deepest part of the divine court, Dawn hugged Little Crescent Moon with a solemn expression. She did not expect the situation to be so serious. The divine court was actually being attacked. Ever since her husband became emperor, she had never encountered such a situation. Little Crescent Moon also seemed to feel that a storm was coming, and she began to cry loudly. She couldn't stop it at all. Suddenly, a terrifying aura descended upon the sacred mountain. A giant hand tore through the sky and tore everything apart, grabbing at Little Crescent Moon. It should be said that the Underworld Lord's target was Little Crescent Moon. As Yi Shiwen's only child, Little Crescent Moon's status in the divine court could be said to be like a little princess. In terms of importance, it was not an exaggeration. Now, the Underworld Lord wanted to take Little Crescent Moon away. What? Little Crescent Moon immediately cried when she sensed the danger. However, the giant hand did not have any intention of stopping. On the contrary, it continued to grab at her. Dawn had no choice but to protect Little Crescent Moon under her body, clenching her teeth and persevering. And just as the giant hand was about to grab Little Crescent Moon, an astonishing beam of light suddenly flew out from Little Crescent Moon's body. The beam of light transformed into a figure. Who else could it be but Yi Shiwen? Yi Shiwen held the Nether Dragon Halberd in hand and slashed at the giant hand. Rumble! The collision between the two Empyrean lords happened in an instant. Yi Shiwen's strike blasted apart the giant hand formed from Qi. His strike followed the Qi hand and headed straight for the Underworld Lord. Bam! The attack that erupted from the Nether Dragon Halberd was eventually blocked by the Underworld Lord's hand. Oh! The Underworld Supremacy had not expected that his sneak attack would fail. With his cultivation and status, it was already embarrassing enough for him to sneak an attack on a child. What was even more embarrassing was that he had actually failed. This was because he never expected that Yi Shiwen would be so extravagant as to leave a Dao artifact in a child's body. This was the root cause of his failure. Yi Shiwen disintegrated on the spot after his attack failed. It was not the real Yi Shiwen, but a manifestation of a wisp of spirit. At the critical moment, he had activated the Nether Dragon Halberd, allowing him to destroy the Underworld Lord's attack. However, with the power of that wisp of spirit, it was already the limit. It was impossible to go further. After all, the Underworld Lord was an Empyrean Lord. It was naturally not easy to destroy an Empyrean Lord's attack. Haha, the trump card that Yi Shiwen set up in the little girl's body has finally come into effect. Yimo immediately heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the situation. He could not help but laugh out loud. When Yi Shiwen left the nether dragon halberd in Little Crescent Moon's body, everyone felt that it was a bit wasteful. After all, it was a Tao artifact. He actually left it to a little girl. Even if she was his own daughter, it was still a bit extravagant. However, Yi Shiwen was very rich in the aspect of Tao artifacts. Throughout the ages, there were probably not many Empyrean lords who could be compared with him in this aspect. He had more than one Tao artifact before he became an Empyrean lord. Therefore, Yi Shiwen's concept was different from ordinary people. He did not think that this thing was so precious. However, it was just to add an additional safeguard for Little Crescent Moon. He did not expect that it would be used so soon. He did not expect that an Empyrean lord, a master of the Empyrean lord's level, would actually attack Little Crescent Moon. This was why the spirit in the nether dragon halberd was exhausted and dispersed. Everyone could not help but sigh in relief when they saw that the attack of the Empyrean lord was finally defeated and did not cause huge casualties. Everyone could not help but let out a sigh of relief. Suddenly, everyone shrank the line of defense. They could not let the Empyrean lord have such an opportunity again. It was enough for such a situation to happen once. If they let it happen again, they would not be able to face anyone. Empyrean lord, do you have any shame? As a dignified Empyrean lord, you actually attacked a little girl who has not yet reached adulthood. Where is your moral integrity? Has it been eaten by a dog? Yimo shouted. In the Divine Palace today, all of you will die. Do you think you can still survive? Said the Empyrean lord with a sneer. It just so happens that all of you are potential competitors. Today, I will kill all of you. At that time, no one will compete with me anymore. The words of the Empyrean lord suddenly made many people shiver. As expected, he is another narrow-minded person. We should not let him become an Empyrean lord at all. His ascension to Empyrean lord is a huge threat to the myriad world. Unlike Yi Shiwen's tolerance, the Empyrean lord's performance was too dangerous. And these words also made these Empyrean lords' mood very bad. The Empyrean lord was only one step ahead of them. Now he actually completely regarded them as ants. Does he think he can kill them as he wishes? This was simply too arrogant. Chapter 29:77. The terrifying sounds of collision instantly turned into monstrous tides. The repercussions of the battle caused even the world to tremble. Countless living beings sensed this attack and even felt a tremor that came from the bottom of their hearts. It was as if the entire world was about to collapse. Rumble! Back then, Yi Shiwen was also a powerful martial emperor who killed the rebellious emperor and finally quelled the chaos of the heavenly clan. Moreover, even if he is lucky enough not to die, do you think he can come back to save you? Even if he can come back, I will kill him with my own hands. Everyone took a closer look and saw that this person was none other than Yi Shiwen. For a time, all the Tao tools began to completely awaken. Terrifying power swept out, and billions of rays of light erupted, pouring down overwhelmingly. All kinds of terrifying rays of light erupted in this process. The horror of the Underworld Lord was far beyond everyone's imagination. No one expected that the Underworld Lord would be so powerful. He was not like a new Emperor Lord who had just become an emperor. Many people secretly thought that using the opportunity to become an emperor was indeed not the right way. Not only was he not as good as Yi Shiwen, who tore apart the Great Path to become an emperor during the confinement period, he was not even as good as the Underworld Lord who became an emperor normally. On the body of the Underworld Lord, golden rays of light soared into the sky, illuminating hundreds of millions of miles. It was so bright that it seemed to be cast from the heavens. It rushed to the sun and the moon, so that heaven and earth could feel his majesty and power. Boom! He directly rushed into the 5 yuan sky, punishing Greater Ray without any fear. His simple attack was incomparably domineering. So powerful! Even Yi Wudi had to admit that the Underworld Lord was really unimaginably powerful at this time. For a time, the entire universe was filled with a large amount of Tao power, as if many Emperor Lords had awakened at the same time, madly resisting in the entire universe. This attack made all the experts' hearts palpitate. With Yi Shiwen's loud shout, the word seal expanded in the wind like a pair of wings, wrapping the underworld lord in it. At this juncture, no one dared to hide their strength, because once they hid their strength, it was likely that the final result would be a tragic death. Anyone who could cultivate to become an emperor was a powerful existence with absolute arrogance. But now, everything had been reversed. The underworld lord's strength was terrifyingly tyrannical, completely different from the strength of a newborn sovereign emperor that everyone had imagined. He was even stronger. The seal character emitted billions of beams of divine light that slammed into the underworld supremacy. Countless Imperial Lord-level laws were attracted over and fused with it, causing the seal character to grow larger and stronger. It pushed the underworld supremacy back tens of thousands of miles. Bang! A treasured armor appeared on the underworld supremacy's body, directly blocking the young Kunpeng's attack. He turned around and blasted out. Even the yin-yang diagram of life and death was shaken. It suffered the impact and was sent flying. I think you are really too arrogant. Since ancient times, there have been people who were slaughtered right after becoming martial emperors. You are too arrogant. The underworld sovereigns might even cause many Dao artifacts to start humming, erupting with waves of Dao might to contend with the underworld sovereign. Seal, please. Seeing that the young Kunpeng was about to suffer, Yemo immediately knew that he could not wait any longer. He quickly shouted. In the depths of the divine court, a ray of light broke through the vast sky, emitting billions of powerful rays of light, covering the sky and covering the earth. It directly formed an incomparably huge seal character. The divine light was monstrous, surging, and directly suppressed in the direction of the underworld supremacy. Everyone had never imagined that the underworld supremacy's attack would be so terrifying. Many Dao artifacts spontaneously united to resist him. It was difficult to contend with an emperor like the underworld supremacy with just the awakening of one Dao artifact. However, it was completely different when many Dao artifacts united. It was as if someone was shouting this character in the universe. Countless energy faintly formed a human figure. The underworld supremacy sneered. His words revealed unimaginable strength. Obviously, he did not take Yi Shiwen seriously. Boom! You're all a group of ignorant people. Do you really think that an emperor is so easy to deal with? You are just a group of frogs at the bottom of a well. The underworld supremacy sneered. Obviously, he did not agree with the words of these people. Everyone was shocked by the strength of the underworld supremacy. He was even more tyrannical than the NID. At that time, the NID besieged EMO and the others and formed the 5 Yuan Punishing Heaven formation, but it was unable to defeat them. Bang! Oomph! The underworld supremacy attacked again. With a blow, the defense line formed by the joint forces of various Dao artifacts actually retreated several steps before barely stopping. His vital energy and blood even emitted a rumbling sound, as if the stars were shining. Seal, underworld supremacy, do you really think that you are invincible in the world? Impossible. How can the underworld supremacy be so strong? The second unlucky one was the young Kunpeng. He directly transformed into his original body. Above his head was the yin-yang life and death diagram. He collided with the underworld supremacy with unimaginable strength. The major forces had no way to contend against him unless someone became an emperor. However, that was really too difficult to say. Small tricks. Descendant of the demon master, die and become my slave. Ha! The underworld supremacy laughed loudly and directly grabbed at the young Kunpeng. He had followed 2 emperors. In terms of insight, there were probably not many in the universe who could compare with him. Naturally, he was very clear about what a normal emperor who had just become an emperor looked like. At this time, everyone missed the days when there was a martial emperor suppressing everywhere. Although it seemed uncomfortable to have someone above their head, it was still better than being exterminated like this. You actually dared to come out instead of hiding. Even if there is no martial emperor, we can still kill you. The only difference is that we will have to pay a more painful price. What wishful thinking! Yemo, who was in the middle of the formation, sneered. The underworld supremacy's unscrupulous attitude completely enraged many people. Boom! The strength of an emperor was indeed extraordinary, but should not be to this extent, especially when he had just become an emperor. He had not even condensed his own Tao artifact. Logically speaking, it was absolutely impossible for him to be so strong. However, the underworld supremacy had done it. There must be a reason that no one knew about. Who was the one having wishful thinking? The underworld supremacy took a step forward, and the aura on his body exploded. Countless rune laws condensed around his body, revealing a dense aura of death. It was incomparably surging. The entire universe was trembling, as if it could not withstand the recovery of so many powerful Tao powers. Even his strength was almost comparable to Yi Shiwen, who had just become an emperor. However, now that the martial emperor had gone deep into the chaos, no one knew when he would return. Only God knew if he could make it in time. The martial sect had already burned incense and prayed. If the martial emperor received the news, he would return. Therefore, the only thing they could do now was to completely block the underworld supremacy and buy time for the martial emperor to return. Stop him. We must not let him continue. I don't believe that his strength is comparable to a martial emperor. There must be something fishy about this. Yemo roared. Once again, he formed the 5 yuan punishing heaven formation with Yi Wudi and the others. They had already rehearsed this once, so they were naturally familiar with it. Bang! Yi Wudi, who bore the brunt of the attack, was directly hit. His entire body was instantly blasted away, and he spat out a mouthful of golden blood. Fortunately, he had the Demon Emperor Bell to protect his body. Otherwise, his entire body would have been smashed into pieces. The figure of the huge Kunpeng was revealed. As for the others, they restrained it from the side, using the 5 yuan punishing heaven formation as the core to resist. Ants, the underworld supremacy sneered and instantly attacked. For a moment, all kinds of terrifying aura poured out like mercury. For a moment, the sky fell and the earth cracked. The whole world seemed to shake with this attack. Even though the young Kunpeng was already a peak quasi-emperor, at this time, he still felt that kind of terrifying pressure. All the laws around him were imprisoned by the underworld supremacy, and all his escape routes were blocked. This is absolutely impossible. He did not become an emperor during the confinement period. He definitely can't be so tyrannical. Is this the strength of the emperor level? Damn it, I also want to achieve the way. I also want to become an emperor. Only then can I compete with them. However, the pressure on him was also increasing. The underworld supremacy had no intention of playing hide-and-seek with them. All his attacks were strong and direct, and they were beaten back step by step. Soon, they had retreated to the edge of the divine court. At this time, everyone could only cooperate sincerely. They could all see that if the underworld supremacy continued to wreak havoc, he would gather more and more undead army. At that time, it was possible that he would really sweep the world. These people were once on the same level as the underworld supremacy. In fact, they had achieved the way much longer than the underworld supremacy. Some of them had achieved the way before the Second War of Resistance against the heavens. Which one of them was not far more qualified than the underworld supremacy? Although seniority could not be eaten, the current situation was also different from the past. The heavenly way had released the confinement, and they could also become emperors in the future. In terms of mentality, they did not think that they were worse than the underworld supremacy. Now, Yemo and the others had formed the 5 yuan heaven punishment great formation. Their skills were even stronger than before, and they had the help of stronger Tao tools. Even so, they were still beaten back step by step. From this aspect, it could be seen that the underworld supremacy was much more tyrannical than the NID of the past. It is really the era of the emperor now. It is not the past. In the future era, there is no right to speak at all. Do you still expect Yi Shiwen to come back? What a joke! said the underworld supremacy coldly. Yi Shiwen went deep into the chaos, and there is no news of him for so long. It is obvious that he has fallen in it. However, the underworld supremacy's offensive had just begun. He attacked again and actually made the formation of the Dao tools retreat continuously. Chapter 29:78. This seal word grew bigger and bigger in the universe. With the appearance of this seal word, everyone found that everything in the world seemed to be sealed. Time, space, yin and yang, the five elements, everything was completely sealed. He even felt as if a large hand was gripping his neck so tightly that he couldn't even breathe. It was too strong. It wasn't that no one had studied the Tao of sealing before, but no one knew that just the word seal could actually be so tyrannical. At this moment, they suddenly understood that perhaps the 3,000 great Taos in this world all had their own tyrannical aspects, and there was no great Tao that was useless. It all depended on one's own cultivation. The word seal, when used by Yi Shiwen, could actually burst out such a terrifying power. It could even seal an Emperor Lord. Is this the backup left by the martial emperor? It's really powerful. Someone couldn't help but exclaim. Obviously, this should be the backup left by the martial emperor Yi Shiwen. In these years, Yi Shiwen should have left a lot of backup for the divine court. No wonder he dared to leave the divine court and go deep into the chaos. Everyone held their breath and focused their attention. All eyes were staring at the direction of the Underworld Lord. They saw the Underworld Lord constantly struggling in this seal word. The word seal grew bigger and bigger in the wind. It almost covered the entire sky completely. Boom, boom, boom. Facing the crushing seal word, the Underworld Lord's response was also very violent. He didn't think of retreating at all. Instead, he resisted in the most violent way, constantly bombarding this seal word. His terrifying fists smashed the sky, and even the entire seal word began to crack. Sure enough, the seal word still can't do anything to the Underworld Lord. Although the means left by the Emperor Lord can be used to fight against the Emperor Lord. After all, without the Emperor Lord personally activating it, it can at most restrain the Emperor Lord a little. Sigh, it's a pity. This Underworld Lord is too strong. It's really strange. He's already so terrifying when he just became an Emperor Lord. Is he going to challenge the martial Emperor Lord in the future? Many people couldn't help but have such thoughts. Yi Shiwen had established immortal majesty over the years. However, the Dark Lord's performance in the past few years had been too strong. In fact, everyone couldn't help but look at him in a new light. People couldn't help but have such thoughts. No one knows. Probably only they themselves know the difference in strength between the imperial emperors. Boom! A series of shocking explosions came from the seal character, and the Dark Lord's continuous shouts could be heard. Boom! A huge roar was heard, and the world shook violently. Then, everyone saw that the powerful seal that could seal the entire universe exploded on the spot. It could not withstand the series of fatal attacks from the Dark Lord. Humph! Even if Yi Shiwen were here, I would still kill him without hesitation. Moreover, you want to deal with me with a mere seal? How childish and laughable. Nether's sovereign laughed coldly. Clearly, he felt that everyone was extremely laughable. Kill! Suddenly, a sword of light appeared in Yi Mo's hand. A torrential evil aura surged from the ancient sword, causing the world to tremble violently. Everyone was stunned as they looked at Yi Mo. On the sword of light in Yi Mo's hand, the seal character was particularly conspicuous. Obviously, it was exactly the same as the previous seal character. They should be of the same origin. As Yi Mo removed the word seal from the light sword, in an instant, endless hostility filled the world. The laws of the way of the sword danced. As if in an instant, there were countless experts of the way of the sword chanting for this sword light, and countless sword gods resonated at the same time. Whoosh! This sword light tore the sky and fiercely shot in the direction of the Underworld Lord. Fast! 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 The speed of this sword was too fast. It surpassed space and time. In an instant, it rushed to the front of the underworld lord's face. Pucci! This sword directly tore the sky and slashed at the underworld lord's face. The underworld lord had just broken free from the seal of the seal character. He had no time to react and was directly slashed by the sword. Bang! The underworld lord's entire head was smashed on the spot, and his imperial blood suddenly exploded. Ah! The underworld lord's roar could be heard throughout the universe. His head was reconstructed in front of everyone. He had never imagined that he would be tricked and his head would be smashed by a sword. How could he not be angry? He had just vowed that Yi Shiwen was definitely not his opponent, but now his head had been destroyed by the sword chi and the seal that Yi Shiwen had left behind. This was simply a slap in the face, a ruthless slap in the face. It's done, ha! Everyone was immediately overjoyed. From the moment the underworld lord attacked just now, he had displayed an overly strong side. No matter what kind of attack they had, it had no effect on him. He was simply like an unsolvable bug. Although they did not say it out loud, they actually did not have much confidence in their hearts. And now, seeing that Yimo's attack had worked, how could they not be elated? The most important thing was that it proved that the underworld lord was not a true martial emperor. If he used his full strength, there was still hope of killing him. Many experts who were not from the regal sect could not help but be terrified when they saw this scene. The emperor's inheritance. This was the true heritage of the emperor's inheritance. The underworld lord, who no one could do anything about, had actually suffered a huge loss here. If he had not been forced to the extreme, who would have thought that Divine Palace still had such a hidden trump card? This was also the fundamental key reason why Yi Shiwen had to lure the inverse emperor out to fight. If he had not lured the inverse emperor out, the current situation that the underworld lord was facing would be the situation that Yi Shiwen had to face back then. How could Yi Shiwen not have to carefully set up that trap? I must flatten Divine Palace. The underworld lord roared, but his roar had not yet ended. Another shocking sword chi penetrated the galaxy like a mountain and blasted the underworld lord's chest. Bang! The underworld lord was blasted away on the spot. His chest instantly exploded, and it was a bloody mess. He screamed continuously, and his angry roar shocked the world. Whoosh! 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 One sword light after another fell from the sky and directly blasted towards the underworld lord. Wave after wave of sword chi caught the dark supremacy completely off guard. Everyone was dumbfounded. How much sword chi was stored in Divine Palace? It could be released continuously and hit an emperor to the point that he could not even lift his head. This was really enough. Bang! 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 The deafening sounds of collisions made everyone's teeth ache. The dignified underworld sovereign was actually forced to this extent. At the same time, they were also shocked by the depth of Divine Palace's foundation. One must know that this kind of sword chi was almost equivalent to an all-out attack of an emperor. It was not something that could be easily sealed. Therefore, even among the various emperor's inheritances, there were not many such techniques. However, there were so many Divine Palace experts. Even if their emperor had just ascended the throne, there were still too many of them. However, the storm-like sword lights finally stopped. That split second was enough for the underworld supremacy to take a breather and regroup. He was just stunned by Yi Mo's continuous attacks at the beginning. Otherwise, with his strength, he would not be so weak. Only Yi Mo, who had followed two emperors, knew some of the emperor's weaknesses. Only then could he have such a wonderful continuous attack. Otherwise, it was impossible to hurt the underworld lord at all. You are dead. The underworld lord's eyes were filled with anger. He was no longer like in the beginning when he did not care at all. He just treated them like ants and did not care at all. He was already furious to the extreme. A dignified emperor was schemed against like this, and even his head was smashed. Although in a sense, the person who smashed his head was Yi Shiwen, he didn't have time to think so much at this time. Only his unimaginable anger was burning in his heart. Everyone in Divine Palace, no one will be spared. I want you to die a horrible death. The underworld lord's loud roar came. No one will be spared from my divine palace. I also want to see if you have such a method. Suddenly, a chilly voice resounded from the horizon. However, as soon as this voice fell, a figure appeared in front of everyone. The figure stepped on a golden lotus and broke out of the dazzling light. Martial Emperor. It's the Martial Emperor. Great! The Martial Emperor has returned. Everyone recognized who this figure was and could not help but cry tears of joy. It could be said that during this period of time, they were almost forced to the limit by the Underworld Lord. They almost overturned a small half of the heavens and myriad realms. They did not know how many creatures were slaughtered and turned into an undead army. Now, he had arrived in front of the mountain gate of the divine court. Everyone had joined hands, but they weren't a match for him. This had left everyone in despair. Many people were wondering where Yi Shiwen had gone under such circumstances. And where could he have gone? And now, Yi Shiwen had finally appeared in front of everyone. When the Underworld Lord saw that the person who appeared was actually Yi Shiwen, he could not help but feel nervous. No matter what he said before, Yi Shiwen's prestige had already spread throughout the heavens and myriad realms in the past tens of thousands of years. These people lived in Yi Shiwen's shadow. It was impossible to say that they were not afraid of Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen, you finally showed up? The Underworld Lord looked at Yi Shiwen coldly. His eyes were red, and there was a faint murderous aura released from his face. Yes, I'm back, said Yi Shiwen. Fortunately, I still made it in time. However, Underworld Lord, just now you said that you want to trample my divine palace and slaughter everyone in my divine palace. Is that right? Say it again if you have the guts. Chapter 2979. If you have the guts, say it again. Suddenly, everyone was stunned by Yi Shiwen's words. Domineering. What is domineering? This is domineering. Yi Shiwen's domineering aura didn't diminish, even though he was facing a powerful emperor. He clearly didn't take the underworld supremacy seriously. Even if the underworld supremacy had once defeated the myriad heavens and realms, he was still a junior in front of Yi Shiwen. Although the gap of more than 20,000 years was nothing in terms of the lifespan of an emperor, and they should be regarded as peers, everyone had a feeling of a gap of generations. Yi Shiwen should not be in their generation, or it should be said that ordinary people could not be compared to him, even if they were also emperor lords. The Underworld Lord squinted his eyes. He was not intimidated by Yi Shiwen's aura. After all, he was also an emperor lord, and he had his own pride. How could he lower his head in front of Yi Shiwen? Yi Shiwen, don't be too arrogant. You have no right to be arrogant in front of me. You are an emperor lord, and I am also an emperor lord. Both emperor lords? That's ridiculous. Yi Shiwen sneered slightly. Could it be that Ming Di died in such a hurry that he did not teach you about the Ninth Realm Emperor Lord? You have just become an Emperor Lord. How can you compete with me? Yi Shiwen didn't wait for the Dark Supremacy's reply. He continued to speak. I roughly understood your master's plan after seeing you. I didn't take you seriously at first. You were just an ant that escaped. Even Dark Emperor was killed by me. So, the Dark Nation wouldn't be able to stir up any big waves. However, I didn't expect that you would become so powerful. It seems that Dark Emperor was already prepared for this. If I kill him, I'll leave a seed like you behind. In the heavens and myriad realms, there are countless geniuses and heroes. How can you be the first one? Ming Di must have left some tricks behind. Yi Shiwen walked over step by step. Behind him, there was a brilliant light. You don't look like you have just achieved Tao. Could it be that he transferred his Tao source to you? Yi Shiwen's vision was very sharp, and he was very wise. There were many things in the world that he didn't know, but he could naturally understand the whole story with just a glance. This was the only reason that could explain why the Underworld Lord, who had just become a martial emperor, was so powerful, almost comparable to the Second Realm. When he tore apart the shackles of the heavens during his confinement period, he was only at the consummate level of the First Realm. How could the Dark Lord be more powerful than him? This was impossible. That's right, Yi Shiwen. I didn't expect you to have such good foresight. However, even so, I can't save you today. You can't kill me. I'm not the Underworld Emperor. said the underworld lord coldly. Yi Shiwen understood what he was implying. He was clearly saying that Yi Shiwen had killed Ming Di because he had an unfair advantage. He had taken advantage of Ming Di's injuries to kill him. There was nothing to be proud of. Do you think that I have an unfair advantage? Yi Shiwen sneered and said. Isn't it? Said the underworld lord coldly. You took advantage of his injuries to kill him. You are just a despicable person who took advantage of others. Ha ha ha! Yi Shiwen laughed loudly. Taking advantage of others? Despicable scum. I find these words extremely laughable coming from your mouth. Do you know that if Ming Di hadn't taken advantage of the situation and ambushed the master of the underworld from behind, he wouldn't have ended up in such a state. He only has himself to blame for his current predicament. Moreover, you're talking to me about fairness? You only saw that he was seriously injured, but you didn't see that he had cultivated for who knows how many years, and I had only just attained the Tao. Do you think that this is fair? Or does fairness depend on the person? Yi Shiwen sneered and said, You are too childish. I really don't know why Ming Di chose you as his successor. If you were a coward, I might not have rushed to kill you. But it's different now. You must die because you are committing a sin. Everyone wants you dead, so you must die. Yi Shiwen sneered and said, You are too naive. Destiny? I never believe in destiny. I only believe in myself, said the underworld lord coldly. You don't understand. This is not destiny, but the will of all living beings. When you think that you are above all living beings, you will understand that you have gone astray, said Yi Shiwen lightly. Astray? I never believed in this. My path is the best path. My path is destiny. My path is what the Great Way thinks. You don't have to use this method to shake my heart. It's useless. Today we can have a fair fight. I will let the world understand that the inheritance of the underworld kingdom isn't as weak as the rumors say, said the underworld lord coldly. When he was still an emperor, he was plagued by such rumors. This was because when Ming Di was defeated by Yi Shiwen, it looked too easy. Even though Ming Di was equally powerful, he couldn't even withstand 10 moves and died in Yi Shiwen's hands. This made many people who didn't know the truth think that the underworld kingdom was actually just SOSO. How could the pride in his heart endure this? In other words, he couldn't bear it at all. There is no Tao that is weak. The one who is weak is oneself, said Yi Shiwen lightly. Although he didn't like Ming Di's actions, he didn't belittle Ming Di's Tao either. After all, if his opponent was trash, then wouldn't that prove that he was trash as well? He wasn't worth anything at all. Yi Shiwen, you are too arrogant. Do you really think that you are invincible in the world? You are not even in the 9th realm. The underworld lord finally couldn't bear it anymore. This was because he felt that Yi Shiwen didn't care about him at all. This was a humiliation. He regarded Yi Shiwen as a powerful enemy who must be killed, but Yi Shiwen didn't care about him at all. It could even be said that Yi Shiwen didn't care about him at all. He was even worse than his master, who was on the verge of death. The underworld lord finally made his move. He looked coldly at Yi Shiwen and walked towards Yi Shiwen step by step. He was incomparably majestic. After all, he was an emperor-level figure who shocked the world. In his eyes, there was a scene of the birth of the world and the chaos. His every move had a great pressure that made people tremble. He was a terrifying existence that could make everyone in the world tremble and submit. A worn-out iron robe appeared on his body. It looked ordinary, but Yi Shiwen could see that it was actually a Tao tool. It was just that even Yi Shiwen couldn't see the origin of this Tao tool. It seemed to be a Tao tool passed down from a very long time ago. Otherwise, with Yi Shiwen's cultivation and knowledge, it was impossible for him to be ignorant. This robe of yours is quite unique. Facing the underworld lord who had become serious, Yi Shiwen didn't have the slightest change in expression. It made people feel as if a spring breeze was caressing their faces. Everyone looked at Yi Shiwen nervously. This battle was another battle between two emperors. Yi Shiwen's prestige had grown day by day over the past tens of thousands of years. However, the strength of the underworld lord couldn't be underestimated. He was even more invincible in the past few years. This was another battle of generations. Martial Emperor, kill him. This guy is too much. Yemo roared. Yishuan nodded. His expression didn't change. He just faintly said, he can't leave. This time, he must die. He must die? You want me to die? The underworld lord laughed. He was so angry that he laughed. From the beginning to the end, Yishuan had never put him in his eyes. This was a great humiliation. Yishuan, you will pay the price, said the underworld lord. This robe was found by my master countless years ago. According to his speculation, it might be a heavenly robe that had existed since the mythological era. I fled from the netherworld kingdom in a hurry. I didn't bring anything with me. In the end, I only brought this robe with me. I haven't refined it into a Tao tool. Today, I will use it to kill you. Something from the mythological era? Yishuan's interest was piqued. The heavens and the 10,000 worlds were divided according to time. After the Second War of Resistance against the heavens, it was the long, ancient era. In this era, only the Emperor of Qin had truly attained the Tao. He had become an emperor and dominated the world. The Second War of Resistance against the heavens had happened in the medieval era. In that era, the three races of humans, demons, and demons had fought each other. Countless heavens' pride and outstanding talents had emerged. Many emperor lords had stood side by side. Finally, the three races had joined forces to fight against the heavenly race who had broken out of the seal. This was the medieval era. Even further back than the medieval era was the beginning of the heavenly race's domination of the world. Then, there had been a chaotic war with the three races. Finally, the heavenly race had been sealed. This was the first war of resistance against the heavens. This was the ancient era. Even further back than the ancient era, even further back than the heavenly race's domination of the world was the so-called mythological era. For example, the Titan race was one of the countless divine races who had dominated the world during the mythological era. There had been a chaotic era before the mythological era. It was said that there had been 3,000 demon gods. Each of them wasn't inferior to the emperor lords. Finally, they had transformed into the 3,000 great ways of the world. However, that era was too far back, so it could only be regarded as a myth or a legend. The only thing that could be regarded as a historical record was the mythological era. However, even the survivors of the Second War of Resistance against the heavens were as rare as phoenix feathers and Sheelan horns. Not to mention the mythological era, which was even more ancient than the First War of Resistance against the heavens. In fact, it could only exist as a myth and legend. In that era, the innate gods had ruled the world. They were unimaginably powerful. The myriad races had no choice but to surrender to these innate gods. However, that era had been too glorious and prosperous. However, it had also been defeated too quickly. It seemed as if it had been defeated overnight. The collapse of the mythological era had also been completed overnight. Then there had been a long period of chaos. It had been too chaotic, so much so that there weren't many historical materials. This continued until the heavenly race had emerged and ruled the world. Now, this Taoist robe was actually from an endless era. How could Yishuan not be interested in this? Chapter 2980. The rise of the mythological era could no longer be investigated. Its collapse was also too bizarre. In an instant, those innate gods who once ruled the world seemed to have died. No one knew what happened to them. No one knew. There was not much textual evidence that had been passed down until now. However, judging from this Taoist robe, there should also be emperor level masters in the mythological era. However, they might have been passed down from the chaotic era. Those eras were too long ago. It was really hard to understand. However, according to the legend, the cultivation system of the mythological era was completely different from the current one. It formed its own lineage and used innate magical powers as the main cultivation method. Yishuan was very interested. After all, at his level, all magical powers and martial arts could be learned from each other. Perhaps there would be other gains. Don't worry, he won't live. I am interested in the things of the mythological era. Maybe I can see a completely different path, said Yishuan. Unfortunately, you don't have a chance now. The underworld supremacy shouted loudly and attacked directly. A dazzling brilliance shot straight towards Yi Shiwen's face as soon as he attacked. He wanted to kill Yi Shiwen with a single strike. Bang! This attack directly bombarded 3 inches in front of Yi Shiwen. It was blocked by the barrier spread by the time robe. This attack was very strong. It directly hit the time robe and made it tremble slightly. It was not something that ordinary people could imagine. Humph! The Dark Lord sneered when he failed to kill Yi Shiwen. He took a step forward without any hesitation and threw a punch towards Yi Shiwen. The fist energy formed a huge light pillar that rushed straight to the sky. It spread out countless huge lights. Each of them was like an ancient, divine mountain, exuding unimaginable power. One could imagine how terrifying this punch was. Just the pressure alone was enough to cause the heavens and earth to tremble violently before it even reached them. The power of this punch caused many formations in the divine court to automatically awaken to resist it. Compared to now, the Underworld Lord had not really used his full strength. Perhaps to him, there was no opponent in the divine court who was worthy of his full strength at that time. Bang! Yi Shiwen raised his hand and blocked this punch. The 2 emperors clashed, and the world wailed and trembled. The shockwaves spread out, and many people who wanted to watch the battle from a close distance couldn't help but retreat again and again. But very quickly, they felt that the terrifying pressure stopped almost immediately. A formation pattern formed in front of them, almost immediately forming a large formation, protecting everyone in the battlefield. As for the undead, they naturally didn't have such protection. In the aftermath of the battle, more than half of them were annihilated in an instant. Previously, no matter how hard they tried to kill the undead, it seemed as if the battle would never end. Now, however, with just a single move, more than half of the undead had been killed. The survivors of the Netherworld had also suffered great losses. Very soon, the Underworld Lord also noticed Yi Shiwen's arrangement. He couldn't help but be furious. Yi Shiwen, you dare to be distracted while fighting me. You're really courting death. He was furious to the extreme. Yi Shiwen didn't put him in his eyes at all. It was a slap to his face. Die, hand of death. His broad palm slammed down towards Yi Shiwen. Each of his fingers was as huge as a mountain. Boundless death energy pervaded the air, forming an incomparably huge phantom of Hell Emperor in the sky. It could reverse life and death, and sever yin and yang. Every finger was condensed from an unknown amount of death energy. It contained the great magical power of the Underworld Lord. It condensed into one and directly covered Yi Shiwen. This palm seemed to have locked the heavens and the myriad world. It had unimaginable power, making Yi Shiwen unable to escape or avoid it. Yi Shiwen stood motionless in the face of this attack. He let this big hand fall down. Everywhere was collapsing. The world was also wailing in grief. It was being destroyed. The world didn't exist forever. It also had its own prosperity. It also had its own destruction. It was just like the life and death of a human being. It could be seen that the Underworld Lord's research on the way of death had reached a very shocking level. The time robe on Yi Shiwen's body erupted with a burst of astonishing rays of light. The power of time was like an invisible giant hand. The world that had been shattered by the power of death had unexpectedly stabilized at this time. It couldn't be broken at all. Take my punch, 6 paths of reincarnation. As soon as Yi Shiwen came up, he also used a powerful move. He blasted out a punch, and the world shook violently. Bang! Yi Shiwen's 6 paths of reincarnation and the hand of death collided fiercely. In an instant, endless light burst out. In an instant, the world collapsed, and the shocking waves formed completely submerged the army of the undead. Those remnants of the Netherworld Kingdom also died in an instant. The Underworld Lord didn't care about the life and death of these people. They were just some ants. So what if they died? To an Emperor Lord, these were just ants. As long as he killed Yi Shiwen, the world would be his. He could have as many subordinates as he wanted. Yi Shiwen blocked the Underworld Lord's attack with one strike. Before the shockwave of the collision could land on the Divine Court, It was completely eliminated by the formation that Yi Shiwen had set up. Yi Mo heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing that Yi Shiwen still had the mood to do such a thing in the midst of an intense battle, it was obvious that he was doing it with ease. It shouldn't be difficult for him to deal with the Underworld Lord. The other Heaven's Chosen Supreme looked at the two people in the battle with complicated feelings. They were supposed to be of the same generation, but now they were left far behind by the two of them. One became an emperor, and the other didn't. This was the difference between heaven and earth. On the sacred mountain inside the divine court, Dawn couldn't help but cry tears of joy when she saw her husband return safely. Even though she rarely cried with her current cultivation, it was different this time. Over such a long period of time, there were all sorts of rumors about Yi Shiwen. How could she not worry? Even the enemy had come knocking on their door, and even his little daughter was nearly abducted. How could she not worry? Now that she finally saw that her husband was fine, she finally heaved a sigh of relief. Daddy, Daddy. Little Crescent Moon also saw her father in the battle outside. To her, she still didn't understand those complicated things. She had completely forgotten about being ambushed and crying in fright. Now that she saw Yi Shiwen return, she was very happy. And outside, the intense battle was still happening. It was just the beginning. Yi Shiwen, you're too careless. The Underworld Lord spoke coldly and ruthlessly. Another strike landed on Yi Shiwen. With the enhancement of the mysterious Taoist robe, the power increased exponentially. This was also the reason why an Emperor Lord who had just become an Emperor could only be at the bottom of the Emperor Lords. Apart from cultivation, the most important thing was that they didn't have a Taoist weapon. Even if their strength was similar, there would be a huge gap when one side had a Taoist weapon and the other didn't. This attack directly pierced through the world. Those quasi-emperors also sensed how extraordinary this attack was. It was almost like a big dragon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, tearing the world apart. It suddenly pierced through the sky, rushed into the galaxy, and finally fell on Yi Shiwen's body. What kind of strike is this? He didn't even use his full strength just now. How can he be so strong? Emperor Ni is definitely not his match. Too strong. He's really too strong. Many people sensed how terrifying this strike was, especially the quasi-emperors. They deeply understood the gap between them and the Emperor Lords. From now on, if they didn't become emperors, they wouldn't be able to live on. Bang! Yi Shiwen merely raised his hand and crushed this astonishing attack. Yes, he crushed it. Everyone seemed to think that they had seen it wrong. Yi Shiwen actually crushed the attack of the Dark Lord. He didn't just simply block it. What did this mean? It meant that although the martial emperor was not in the myriad world these years, his cultivation had become more and more unfathomable. It was unimaginably tyrannical. Arrogant? I don't think so at all. Dark Lord, if you only have this kind of strength, then this day next year will be the anniversary of your death. Yi Shiwen had been in a state of passive defense just now. However, no one would think that he was in a state of passive defense because he couldn't defeat the Dark Lord. On the contrary, although he was in a state of passive defense, he had the upper hand. But now he had finally launched a counterattack. After Yi Shiwen had crushed the Dark Lord's attack, he directly attacked the Dark Lord. He crossed the vast starry sky in one step and arrived in front of the Dark Lord. Then, his hand chopped down like a treasured saber. Under the attack of Yi Shiwen's saber, the protective spiritual power of the Dark Lord was not a match at all. It disintegrated and melted between heaven and earth. And Yi Shiwen seemed to have turned into the most tyrannical and terrifying existence in the world. His attack directly imprinted on the body of the Dark Lord. Bang! The Dark Lord was hit by the attack, and he immediately retreated. He only felt a surge of blood in his chest. His eyes flashed with a look of disbelief. It was just an ordinary attack of Yi Shiwen, but it was a heavy injury for him. If it wasn't for the Taoist robe that he was wearing to block the attack at the critical moment, he would have been seriously injured by Yi Shiwen, and his vitality would have been injured. His pupils shrank slightly. Obviously, at this time, he finally realized that he had completely underestimated Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen could kill his respected master. How could he underestimate this person? Chapter 2981. It was just a simple attack, but it made people feel as if they had been struck by a thunderbolt. It was unimaginably powerful. Yi Shiwen was able to suppress the world for tens of thousands of years. He was indeed worthy of his reputation. It could be said that he was very powerful. What's wrong? Weren't you very arrogant before, saying that you wanted to flatten the divine court? What about now? Yi Shiwen said coldly. Many disciples of the divine court felt extremely relieved. That's right, they were suppressed by the underworld lord for so long. Even though he was an emperor, they were not convinced. The underworld lord was simply bullying the weak. Now that Yi Shiwen was back, he was not as arrogant as before. How dare he still be arrogant? In front of our martial emperors, the strength that he is so proud of is nothing. You only have such combat power because of the source of the great path left behind by Emperor Ming. But you are too impatient. If you were willing to wait a little longer, you might be able to compete with me after you have completely absorbed the source of the great path. It's a pity that you rushed here to die now. What a pity. When Emperor Ming passed the source of the great path to you, he must have never thought that you would be so stupid to do such a thing. Yi Shiwen said lightly. It's a pity that it's all wasted. Yi Shiwen, don't be too arrogant. Do you think that this is all my strength? Don't you want to know how powerful the source of the great path left behind by my master is? I'll let you see it now. The underworld lord roared. His eyes opened, and his aura suddenly rose. His body grew a full head taller, and the power of death began to spread wildly from his body. Behind him, a faintly discernible figure of Emperor Ming was formed, as if Emperor Ming had come back to life. Yi Shiwen, you took advantage of my master when he was seriously injured. Today, I will make you pay with your blood. The underworld lord's big hand suddenly grabbed out and turned into a circle of light of the power of death. It directly forced Yi Shiwen, who had just arrived in front of him, back. Then, he suddenly punched towards Yi Shiwen. They wanted to blast Yi Shiwen into pieces. Insignificant skill, Yi Shiwen's fist blasted out and directly collided with the Dark Lord's fist. The void was shattered at the center of the collision between the two fists. Countless primal chaos poured out and formed a huge crack. The extremely terrifying power poured into it. The underworld supremacy was actually not at a disadvantage in this attack. His body grew larger and larger, like a demon god. Even the sky and earth were torn open. There seemed to be a force constantly pouring into his body from afar, as if someone was transferring power to him. This force caused the stellar energy around him to become denser and denser, causing his clothes to flutter loudly. Again! Dark Lord's voice was cold as he pounced towards Yi Shiwen. Bang! 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 An even more intense battle broke out in an instant. The Dark Lord continued to attack. It seemed as if he wanted to peel off Yi Shiwen's skin and swallow his bones alive. Only then would he be willing to give up. He already hated Yi Shiwen to the core. He must kill Yi Shiwen. However, what truly shocked many experts was the fact that the Dark Lord's strength was continuously increasing with each attack. People who didn't know the truth would think that he had absorbed some kind of energy from Yi Shiwen's body. Therefore, he was constantly improving. How is it possible? He is already an emperor. Logically speaking, it should not be possible for his cultivation to improve by leaps and bounds. How can he be so strong? Many people found it strange. After cultivating to the sovereign emperor realm, the rest was to rely on the accumulation of improvement over a long period of time. They had never heard of a situation where one could advance by leaps and bounds after reaching the sovereign emperor realm, unless one used some kind of natural treasure. It was almost impossible to comprehend it in battle, because the Emperor realm was almost perceptive and could see through everything. Since they could see through everything, it was impossible to suddenly understand a certain point and suddenly improve their cultivation. That was simply impossible. Are you going to swallow the great way origin that your master left for you? Others couldn't understand. But how could Yi Shiwen not understand? He saw through what the underworld supremacy was doing almost immediately. That's right, it's about time. said the underworld supremacy. Previously, his strength was far beyond the strength that an emperor realm who had just become an emperor should have. He relied on the Great Way origin that was left by Emperor Ming. It was almost like a heavenly treasure, constantly nourishing the underworld supremacy, making his future cultivation path more smooth. But now it was different. The underworld supremacy was really going to swallow the Great Way origin in one go. His cultivation might be enough to improve for a while, but in the long run, it was not worthwhile. After all, the Great Way origin had been swallowed. It was gone. It was impossible for it to appear again. Yi Shiwen, you kill my master. Now, I will send you to heaven with the power bestowed by my master. I will make you repent in hell for the rest of your life. The underworld supremacy roared. His aura also seemed to be raised to the extreme after the series of attacks, reaching a bottleneck. He actually rushed to the great perfection of the first realm? Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and immediately understood. He could also see that after swallowing the Great Way origin of Emperor Ming, the underworld supremacy's cultivation had skyrocketed. However, the underworld supremacy's improvement was just the beginning. His aura was still rising crazily. Finally, he broke through the barrier of the second realm and truly entered the second realm of the Emperor realm. The underworld supremacy's aura became more dangerous and violent. It seemed that he still had no way to control the realm that he had just advanced. The aura on his body became exceptionally dangerous and terrifying. Yi Shiwen, I know that your cultivation is already at the second realm. Now that I have also entered the second realm, we are equal. This battle is enough for me to kill you, said the underworld supremacy coldly. However, his eyes were incomparably crazy. He had waited for this day for too long. Seeing that the underworld supremacy had actually swallowed the Great Way origin, everyone was shocked. No one expected that the underworld supremacy actually had such a good thing hidden. It could let his cultivation soar by leaps and bounds in such a short time. Is the martial emperor in trouble now? At the same realm, the original advantage of the martial emperor's realm no longer exists. That's right. Now that he has been pulled back to the same starting line, it won't be easy for the martial emperor to kill him. At the same realm? Do you think that the same realm will be of any use to me? I am truly invincible at the same realm. Yi Shiwen sneered. He didn't take it to heart at all. I want you to die. The underworld supremacy's aura was still rising and still soaring. With every step he took, the vitality in the sky would fuse with his spiritual power. It was simply powerful and terrifying. At this moment, he was the overlord of the world, the only overlord of the world. Around his body, the Taoist robe also seemed to have merged with the world as his aura changed. It faintly formed an armor of vitality of the world. It was mysterious and noble, gorgeous and graceful. Whoosh! The underworld supremacy suddenly rushed in front of Yi Shiwen. His hands suddenly tore, and then directly tore towards Yi Shiwen. The sky was torn apart, and the mighty space energy was about to tear Yi Shiwen into pieces. He hated Yi Shiwen to the extreme, and he couldn't wait for Yi Shiwen to die. I'm going to let you understand now that even if you have swallowed the Great Way source and your strength has skyrocketed, your strength can't be compared to mine. Yi Shiwen directly attacked. His big hand suddenly grabbed out, and for a moment it covered the sky and the sun. It transformed into a terrifying power, and attacked towards the underworld supremacy. Bang! The big hands of the two collided fiercely, and the world seemed to collapse. It shook in all directions, and no one could clearly see what was happening. Underworld supremacy, I want the Taoist robe on your body. It's really a waste to use it on you. The time robe on Yi Shiwen's body shone brightly. Not only the time robe, but all the Taoist tools on his body shone brightly, as if they were going to illuminate the entire river of history. Yi Shiwen's strength had also climbed to the extreme. What is this? How is this possible? It's only been 20,000 years. How can you already be in the second realm great perfection? The underworld supremacy immediately sensed that Yi Shiwen's aura had really climbed to the extreme. He was actually in the second realm great perfection, and he was much stronger than him, who had just entered the second realm. He couldn't believe it at all. Even with Yi Shiwen's tyrannical strength, if he tore apart the shackles of heaven and became an emperor during the confinement period, he would at most be in the first realm great perfection. Even if he improved further in 20,000 years, he would only be an ordinary second realm sovereign emperor. With the strength that he had improved after swallowing the Great Way Source, it was absolutely enough to suppress Yi Shiwen. This was also the fundamental reason why he couldn't wait to launch the Corpse Calamity. He had absolute confidence. But now he discovered that he was wrong. He misjudged Yi Shiwen's strength and overestimated his own strength. Yi Shiwen was actually in the second realm great perfection. How much time has passed? Impossible. What kind of adventure did you have in the chaos? Such a thought flashed in the underworld supremacy's mind. Yes, this was the only way to explain why Yi Shiwen's cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds in just a short period of 20,000 years, and actually rushed to the second realm great perfection. You're right. Unfortunately, even so, you still have to die. Yi Shiwen sneered slightly. The aura on his body was completely released without any scruples. This was the first time he had completely erupted. The underworld supremacy's guess was right. Yi Shiwen's rapid advancement in cultivation was indeed related to the adventure in the chaos. To be precise, after swallowing a large amount of yellow middle plum, his cultivation had advanced continuously and rushed to the second realm great perfection. Chapter 2982. There were not many ordinary people who could smell the yellow middle plum, let alone swallow it. Yi Shiwen swallowed a lot of it. Even with his current status, it could be regarded as a series of fortuitous encounters. If not, he would not be able to accumulate his cultivation to the level of second realm great perfection in such a short period of time. There were 9 stages of the sovereign monarch realm, and advancing in each stage required a vast amount of accumulation. Compared to the accumulation he needed now, even if he added up the accumulation required for all the stages of cultivation, it would not be enough to advance in the sovereign monarch realm. It was completely different. Without the yellow middle plum, even with Yi Shiwen's accumulation, it would still take tens of thousands of years to cultivate to the level of second realm great perfection. However, Yi Shiwen only cultivated to the level of second realm great perfection, and he ended this trip to the chaos world. Even with Yi Shiwen's conceit, he did not dare to break through in the chaos world because the chaos world was too dangerous. Even Yi Shiwen did not know how many terrifying creatures existed in it. The reason why Yi Shiwen returned was that he planned to return to a safe place for close cultivation. In addition, he also had an ominous premonition in his heart, so he hurried back. In the end, he still caught up with this matter. It was just that even Yi Shiwen did not expect that not long after the heaven and earth shackles disappeared, a sovereign lord actually appeared. Moreover, it was such a powerful second realm sovereign lord. If he was still in the first realm, with NID's strength, it would be impossible for him to wreak havoc in the world. Even though it was impossible for everyone to kill him, they could still stop him and prevent him from doing as he pleased. However, compared to the first realm, the second realm sovereign lord was a huge improvement. It was incomparable. Therefore, everyone could not stop the underworld lord who caused a monstrous corpse disaster. Even if you are also in the second realm. So what? Yi Shiwen, do you really think that you are invincible in the world? Said the underworld lord coldly. After recovering from the initial shock, he returned to the cold and arrogant underworld lord. Perhaps I am not invincible, but it is enough to kill you, Yi Shiwen just said faintly. The aura on his body was increasing wildly. The chi of heaven and earth formed a storm, sweeping wildly. Kill me? Underworld supremacy stood with his hands behind his back. We are both imperial emperors. What right do you have to dare to kill me? In an instant, the Netherlord finally made his move. His entire body seemed to have turned into a ball of light, and the laws around him buzzed. In an instant, a sky-piercing divine light shot out and pierced through the sky. The boundless principles formed a frenzy, piercing through everything, and directly rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen's body suddenly retreated, and behind him, devil wings suddenly spread out, protecting him inside. His wings seemed to wrap up the entire world. Bang! With a loud bang, the demon wings instantly blocked the attack. Endless shock waves formed and directly rushed into the star field, into the cold and dark universe. Boom! In the universe, countless stars were swept by the shock wave and turned into dust on the spot. This was the might of a battle between imperial monarchs. Even if they were separated by millions of kilometers, they could still destroy the universe. Everyone really felt cold, and their bodies were ice cold. The battle between the two had once again rushed to a higher level. Compared to the first realm, the second realm Imperial Emperor was even more terrifying and even more shocking. Many people's faces turned pale, and they began to tremble. Is this all you've got? After Yi Shiwen blocked the attack, his whole body shone with divine light. Above his head, the martial Emperor's seal appeared, illuminating the river of time. I am the martial Emperor, and I spread martial arts to the world. All living beings are equal. Yi Shiwen let out a loud and clear voice, and it seemed to have spread throughout the entire universe. His body revolved with unimaginable power, and then he made his move. Break for me, Martial Emperor's Seal. The Martial Emperor's Seal above Yi Shiwen's head expanded against the wind, and after almost growing to a small half of the universe, it suddenly fell down. What martial arts is this? The Underworld Supremacy had never seen this kind of martial arts. It should be known that the Underworld Kingdom had existed for a very, very long time. It could be said that they had records of almost all kinds of martial arts. He had seen all kinds of martial arts, and he had even seen martial arts of the Imperial Monarch level. This is my martial arts, Martial Emperor's Seal. At this moment, the Martial Emperor's Seal had already completely crushed down, and the 3,000 martial arts directly manifested, as if it had manifested a world. The Underworld Supremacy wanted to fight against a world, but he didn't have time to react, and he didn't even have time to retreat. He also didn't expect that Yi Shiwen would have such a move. By the time he wanted to leave, it was already too late. Bang! 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 The enchantment of the Underworld Supremacy's robe began to crumble inch by inch. It seemed like he wasn't a match for the Underworld Supremacy at all. We are both in the second realm, but how can you be so strong? The Underworld Supremacy roared. Death martial scripture, erupt with the true power of death. An unimaginably terrifying power erupted from the Underworld Supremacy's body in a single breath, and he slammed his palm towards the Martial Emperor's Seal. The Death Martial Scripture manifested a series of death characters, and these characters formed a martial scripture. This was the foundation of the Netherworld Kingdom, and it wouldn't be taken out easily under normal circumstances. Right now, the Underworld Supremacy didn't care so much anymore, and directly used it to resist Yi Shiwen's surprise attack. This Death Martial Scripture wasn't just a martial art. It was also an incomparably powerful magic treasure. It had experienced the blessings of the Netherworld Emperor and the Underworld Supremacy, and their martial arts had condensed on it, forming a super magic treasure. Rumble! The Death Martial Scripture and the Martial Emperor's Seal collided on the spot, and the entire starfield was destroyed along with it. The entire universe rumbled and trembled, and even the people hiding in the most remote areas could feel the aftermath of such a battle. It was unimaginably powerful. This was a direct collision between the martial arts of both sides. The Death Martial Scripture recorded all the mysteries of death in the world, and each character was a Tao character, and each character could be expanded into a peerless martial art by itself. And the Martial Emperor's Seal had gathered Yi Shiwen's 3,000 martial arts and was almost comparable to the 3,000 heavenly Tao. Both sides were invincible characters that stood above the common people. The collision of the two martial arts erupted with an everlasting radiance. The Death Martial Scripture looks pretty good, but it's too much of a waste in your hands. You might as well leave it to me. Yi Shiwen roared, and the next wave of attacks arrived almost instantaneously. Once again, the Martial Emperor's Seal smashed down. Yi Shiwen, you want my Death Martial Scripture with just you? The Underworld Supremacy roared angrily. To him, this was also a kind of humiliation, a complete and utter humiliation. Yi Shiwen had actually dared to say such words right under his nose. Clearly, he didn't place him in his eyes at all. So what if I want it? Yi Shiwen's voice hadn't even faded when the martial emperor's seal directly smashed down. Everywhere it passed, even the space was crushed into powder. The might of the martial emperor's seal was simply unimaginable. Coupled with the fact that this was Yi Shiwen's life Dao tool, it could be said that he was like a fish in water when using it, and its might had doubled. Don't be too arrogant. The underworld supremacy was being suppressed, but his counterattack had never stopped. The Taoist robe on his body also seemed to be awakening under this terrifying pressure from Yi Shiwen. This was the instinct of a Dao tool. They were already supreme among the Dao tools, so similarly, they couldn't tolerate even the slightest bit of challenge. At this time, it was actually faintly beginning to awaken. Haha, that's great. Yi Shiwen, you're too arrogant. You'll regret forcing me to this extent. The underworld supremacy was immediately overjoyed when he saw this. Although he had obtained this Taoist robe for a long time, he had never been able to truly awaken it. That was because it was something from the mythological era. The system of the mythological era was simply not the same system as the current one. At that time, what was popular was innate magical powers. Even if one had already reached the Emperor realm, one would still only have a smattering of knowledge regarding the cultivation system of the mythological era. They were two completely different paths, and might even be in the opposite direction. It was precisely because of this that he could only unleash the basic functions of the Taoist robe. He was unable to truly unleash the power of this Taoist robe. But now, under Yi Shiwen's pressure, this Taoist robe was actually beginning to awaken. This was undoubtedly a really good thing for him. After awakening, the power of the Taoist robe would definitely be stronger. This would also increase his strength in disguise. The underworld supremacy roared loudly. With the Taoist robe on his body as a foundation, he directly attacked on the spot. Stars were even evolving in his eyes, and the universe was being born and destroyed. The power of this Taoist robe erupted to the extreme at this time. It erupted with an aura that was enough to destroy the world. This attack could even shatter the entire universe. Not to mention the universe, even the chaos would cease to exist. That's all you can do. The path of cultivation does not allow for even the slightest bit of opportunism. In the end, you still resorted to opportunism. It would have been fine if you had properly digested the origin of the Great Path. But Ming Di left his origin of the Great Path to you, which was equivalent to cutting off his future path. In the end, you didn't cherish it. What a waste of his painstaking efforts. Yi Shiwen said faintly. The origin of the Great Path was incomparably precious to any Emperor realm supremacy. Any damage to it would affect their cultivation, not to mention giving away a portion of the origin of the Great Path. In other words, even if Ming Di could survive, he would not be able to advance an inch. This was a huge price to pay. Yi Shiwen descended from the sky with the martial emperor's seal. Because he had been practicing the overturning sky seal for a long time, Yi Shiwen actually had a cultivation and understanding of seal martial arts that ordinary people could not imagine. That was why he could easily create his own martial arts. The martial emperor's seal was born from the overturning sky seal. However, it was stronger and more suitable for him. Chapter 2983. Boom! The martial emperor's seal collided with the death martial scripture once again. The time robe and the Taoist robe from the mythological era also engaged in a shocking confrontation. The terrifying power rippled in the universe. It seemed that the Taoist robe had begun to gradually recover under the stimulation of the time robe. Then, countless runes appeared on the Taoist robe in front of everyone. These runes were very strange. Even Yi Shiwen couldn't understand them for a while. This was simply incredible. The so-called text was used to record the affairs of the world. No matter how the form changed, its essence was ultimately the same. For an Emperor Lord who had seen through the origin of the heavenly way, he could see through the meaning of any text at a glance. He could even understand the text that he had never seen before. Rather than saying that he understood it, it was better to say that he could see through it directly from the origin. However, Yishuan couldn't recognize these runes for a while. It must have something to do with the language system of the mythological era. After all, it was different. The techniques of both sides were earth-shattering, especially the Taoist robe and the time robe. It seemed as if they had entered into a crazy confrontation. The Taoist robe rose 1 foot, while the devil robe rose 10 feet. The auras of both sides were constantly competing and rising. The time robe also seemed to have been provoked and began to rise crazily. Boom! 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 The attacks from both sides grew even more intense. However, a magic array automatically appeared around them, enveloping their attacks. Due to that, their attacks could not continue spreading out and destroy the world. This is the heavenly formation. It actually forced out the consciousness of the heavenly way. How terrifying is the battle between these two? This is a battle between Emperor Lords. I almost couldn't breathe just now. I thought I would be crushed to death by the aura. Many people breathed a sigh of relief. The battle between the two was too shocking. However, they finally couldn't feel the destructive aura anymore. Even a god-level expert couldn't do anything in the face of such power. The auras of both sides were soaring. However, everyone could see that Yi Shiwen had begun to gain the upper hand. Whether it was his techniques or his strength, he was suppressing the Dark Lord, especially Yi Shiwen's ever-changing means. He had all kinds of martial arts, and all of them were completely different. He was even more tyrannical than the Dark Lord, who only had one martial art. However, Yi Shiwen was different. He had the help of the mysterious space. Not only had he learned a lot of martial arts, but he was also very proficient in all of them. Such a variety of techniques had made the Dark Lord feel like vomiting blood. Gradually, the underworld supremacy felt that the origin of the Great Path in his body was being consumed at an alarming rate. He was able to fight against Yi Shiwen because Ming Di had left him the origin of the Great Path. However, this was also limited. Unlike Yi Shiwen, who used his own strength to activate it, all the losses could be replenished by himself. Yi Shiwen, do you really have to force me to that point? You won't have it easy either. The underworld supremacy finally began to loosen up. At this moment, he no longer had the thought of killing Yi Shiwen. He had already understood that such an idea was too unrealistic. It was simply impossible for it to happen. However, he still felt that he was qualified to retreat. After all, to kill another emperor, even Yi Shiwen would definitely have to pay a painful price. After all, he was not a dabbler like an ID. In the worst-case scenario, they would be able to divide the world with Yi Shiwen. They would be isolated in the south. At the very least, they would be able to regroup and raise the banner of the Netherworld Kingdom again. They would also be a supreme-level existence at that time. So, what if I force you to that point? I gave you a chance before, said Yi Shiwen coldly. His attacks did not stop, and he constantly forced the Dark Lord into a disadvantageous position. It was precisely because of this that the Dark Lord had the idea of retreating. This thought was also seen by everyone. Many people couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. This corpse calamity had come to this step. Was it finally going to end? This was also good. If the two continued to fight, the entire universe would be torn apart. The collision of the Emperor level was too scary. It had been too long since the heavens and the realms had experienced such a collision. Do you really want to perish together with me? The underworld supremacy roared. He did not expect that Yi Shiwen would not even give him a decent chance to retreat. This was not like a confrontation between the Emperor level, because the confrontation between the Emperor level would not easily develop into a life and death battle. If one could kill the other, one would have to pay a painful price. It seemed that Yi Shiwen did not have the slightest self-awareness in this aspect. I gave you a chance, said Yi Shiwen coldly. Gave me a chance? What chance did you give me? The underworld supremacy was forced back by Yi Shiwen again. He retreated again and again. He calmed down the surging blood in his body and roared. After I annihilated the underworld nation, I did not continue to pursue you. Do you really think that I can't find you? I gave you a chance, but you don't know how to cherish it. You have just become an emperor, and you set off a shocking corpse disaster. You have brought disaster to the world. Aren't you courting death? Said Yi Shiwen as he shook his head lightly. He did not pursue the underworld supremacy previously because he left the orthodoxy a way out. The most important thing was that he did not take the underworld supremacy seriously. So what if the underworld supremacy became an emperor? He was still no match for Yi Shiwen. In this regard, Yi Shiwen was confident. He was very confident. Everyone was shocked. Only now did they know that the reason why the underworld supremacy could escape was that Yi Shiwen had shown mercy. Of course, Yi Shiwen was not so pedantic that he would not kill the underworld supremacy when he appeared in front of him. However, as long as the underworld supremacy hid and did not appear, Yi Shiwen would not care about him and let him live. Yi Shiwen, don't put on the appearance of an emperor to lecture me. You are an emperor-level supremacy, and I am also an emperor-level supremacy. What qualifications do you have to lecture me? The underworld supremacy was angered by Yi Shiwen's words because Yi Shiwen's words still showed that he did not take the underworld supremacy seriously. It was not easy for you to become an emperor-level supremacy. After the heaven and earth confinement period ended, you were the first to become an emperor-level supremacy. Heaven also gave you a chance, and this is how you repay it. I can only say that you shouldn't, said Yi Shiwen. You are only an emperor-level supremacy of the second realm, and I am also at the second realm. Even if I am not as good as you, what can you do to me? Said the underworld supremacy coldly. I don't need to pay any price to kill you. You will soon know what I can do to you. Yi Shiwen finally erupted with his strongest combat power. The Avicii sword in his hand directly transformed into a blood dragon that was tens of thousands of feet long. It directly soared into the sky and rushed into the cosmic starry sky. Then, it fiercely slashed towards the underworld supremacy. Impossible! Under this pressure, the enchantment on the Taoist robe directly collapsed in all directions. However, he would never give up like this. With the Taoist robe on his body, he also had a big list. He had never thought of bowing down to Yi Shiwen. This sword directly slashed down and shattered the star domain. The underworld supremacy had no time to escape. He did not want to escape either. He wanted to resist and seize his own path of survival. He did not know why, but such a feeling emerged in his heart. If this continued, perhaps he could only fight for his own path of survival instead of competing with Yi Shiwen and sharing the world equally. Boom! The most terrifying explosion resounded. The entire universe seemed to be split into two halves. The array formed by the Heaven's Way also collapsed on the spot in an instant. The Avicii sword slashed on the Taoist robe. Bang! A crack actually appeared on the Taoist robe. Originally, this Taoist robe was not the real peak. Otherwise, it would not have fallen into a deep sleep until the underworld supremacy obtained it. Now, in the face of Yi Shiwen, who had used his full strength and slashed with the Avicii sword, a crack still appeared on the spot. Pooh! The underworld supremacy spat out a mouthful of blood, which turned into a blood mist that filled the sky. His entire person was blasted away, and his screams shook the universe. Defeated, the underworld supremacy has been defeated. This was the only thought in everyone's mind. It was as if they were witnessing a miracle. The two of them had exchanged blows, and it was finally time to determine who was stronger. The two of them were not evenly matched at all. It seemed like Yi Shiwen had firmly controlled the situation from the beginning to the end. Everyone was sighing, especially those supreme geniuses, old antiques, and old monsters. One after another, they all sighed. Even though they were all sovereign emperors, they were not a match for Yi Shiwen. Many people believed that they could also become emperors, and it was only a matter of time. But facing Yi Shiwen, even if they became emperors, they would still be suppressed by him. Such days were truly bitter. Yi Shiwen sent the underworld supremacy flying with a single slash of his sword. After that, a huge hand appeared and grabbed towards the death martial scripture. He directly grabbed the death martial scripture into the huge hand on the spot. The death martial scripture still wanted to struggle. Each of its words had spirituality and could differentiate between friend and foe. But at this moment, it was useless. In Yi Shiwen's hands, there was no way for it to escape. In just a short while, the death martial scripture was kept in his bag. And at this moment, the underworld supremacy, who had finally completely realized and accepted this situation, promptly fled into the distance with lightning speed. Because of the battle between the two of them, the heavenly Tao had reinforced the laws of the heavens and earth. He had no way of tearing through space to escape and could only flee as fast as he could. Yishuan merely glanced at the underworld supremacy and then chased after him. This time, he would not leave behind any future troubles. The martial emperor seal spun and flew out on the spot. Like an ancient mountain range, it grew larger and larger and then smashed down ruthlessly. Bang! The martial emperor seal directly smashed onto the underworld supremacy. Even with the underworld supremacy's incomparably terrifying sovereign emperor-level physical body, he could not withstand such an attack. With a miserable scream, his physical body shattered into pieces. Chapter 2984. The body of an emperor lord was the strongest in the world. It was even stronger than divine materials. However, the underworld lord's body collapsed under Yi Shiwen's attack. The Taoist robe on his body also flew out and no longer protected him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so miserable. Yi Shiwen thought about it and immediately understood why. The Taoist robe must have awakened its own tool spirit during the collision with the time robe just now. When the tool spirit awakened, it naturally wouldn't be willing to be controlled by the underworld lord, especially when it was obvious that he was going to be defeated. If the battle continued, he might be smashed alive by Yi Shiwen. There were already such signs just now. Cracks actually appeared on his body. However, this had a lot to do with the fact that the underworld lord had never really refined this Taoist robe. After all, he had just become an emperor not long ago. Moreover, this Taoist robe was passed down from the mythological era. It was completely different from the current cultivation system. Even an emperor lord would find it difficult to completely refine it in a short period of time. That was why such a situation occurred. Yi Shiwen immediately roared, "Freeze for me!" Suddenly, it seemed as if everything in the world had been frozen. Time, space, principles, everything had been completely frozen under Yi Shiwen's words. That Taoist robe wanted to escape, but it was completely frozen by Yi Shiwen. There was no way for it to escape. Yi Shiwen's skills were vividly reflected at this time. The underworld lord couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. If Yi Shiwen was in such a situation, he would forcibly tie the Taoist robe to his body instead of letting the Taoist robe leave his body. This was the biggest difference between them. On the other side, without the protection of the Taoist robe, the underworld lord was smashed into pieces by Yi Shiwen's martial emperor seal. Even the most tyrannical emperor lord couldn't bear it. In an instant, his vitality was greatly injured, and he frantically escaped into the distance. However, Yi Shiwen naturally wouldn't leave such a disaster behind. He immediately chased after the underworld lord. The martial emperor seal fell, and the underworld lord was smashed into pieces again. However, the underworld lord still escaped very tenaciously. At this moment, even an emperor lord couldn't ignore life and death. The obsession to survive in his heart completely broke out. Yi Shiwen was in hot pursuit from behind. The two of them fought all the way into the depths of the star field. They were in the cold and dark world. Very quickly, the two of them disappeared. The crowd could no longer see the two of them fighting. However, the aftermath of their battle continued to spread, causing the entire universe to tremble. The battle between the two supreme experts was invincible, and even the heavens and earth trembled. However, everyone could clearly feel that the underworld supremacy's aura was gradually weakening. With every heavy blow that shook the universe, the underworld supremacy's aura was weakening. On the other hand, Yi Shiwen had been maintaining the powerful aura that could make the entire universe tremble. The result of the battle between the two sides was clear at a glance. The battle continued for another 3 days and 3 nights. In the end, the underworld lord's aura disappeared without a trace. Everyone knew that the underworld lord was dead. The emperor lord who brought chaos to the world and set off a monstrous corpse disaster was dead. Although the underworld lord had died, it was a sign of the beginning of a new era. The Underworld Lord was the first person to become an emperor after the confinement period. However, he didn't even have the time to show his most unique brilliance before he died at the hands of Yi Shiwen. This battle made everyone understand who was in charge in this world. Even if all the emperors were alive in the future, he wouldn't lose his brilliance. He was still the world's supreme expert, and everyone must worship him. 3 days later, Yi Shiwen returned. The sky was filled with heavy rain, and it poured into the universe. It was as if the heavens were crying for the fall of a great supreme expert. This battle ended completely with the fall of the Underworld Lord. The corpse disaster that caused chaos in the world was finally over. This battle had turned a small half of the myriad heavens and realms into a land of death. The death chi that pervaded these places also needed to be cleaned up. Not to mention, this empty space was also the focus of the major forces. It seemed that everyone became busy all of a sudden. This battle reminded everyone. First, it would be the era of the Emperor Lords in the future. It was inevitable that the emperors would be alive in the world. If there was the first Underworld Lord, there would be a second and a third person appearing. There was no doubt about this. Second, even if other Emperor Lords appeared, it would probably be Yi Shiwen's world for a long time. He would ascend to the peak, and other Emperor Lords couldn't be compared with him. He'd only attained the Tao for a little over 20,000 years, yet he'd actually killed 4 imperial monarchs in succession. Such a track record was sufficient to stun everyone. 4 of them were Emperor Lords. They weren't cabbages that could be found on the roadside. Since ancient times, such a battle record could definitely be ranked in the top 20 of many Emperor Lords. His Emperor's road had just begun. The door to the future had just opened for him. Not to mention compared with many Emperor Lords, even if compared with those ordinary quasi-emperors, Yi Shiwen still looked young. Strength and cultivation didn't depend on age. At this young age, Yi Shiwen already stood above the myriad heavens. He stood in a position that few people could stand in since ancient times. This battle had completely established Yi Shiwen's supreme prestige. In the future, perhaps no one would doubt whether Yi Shiwen had the ability to rule the world, because there was no need for any doubt at all. Although the appearance of the first Emperor Lord, the Underworld Lord, was disadvantageous and caused great harm to the myriad heavens, it also reminded everyone that the following era would inevitably be the era of Emperor Lords. Those experts who were capable and qualified to attack the Emperor Lord realm finally began long-term closed-door training. In fact, this time, if it wasn't because of the corpse disaster caused by the Underworld Lord, they might still continue to be in closed-door training. Yi Shiwen's return made the entire Divine Court calm down. With Yi Shiwen in charge, everything seemed to be under control. After Yi Shiwen returned, he also chose to go into closed-door training. This time's trip to the Primal Chaos was really fruitful. Just the middle yellow plum tree and the 7-colored living soil were already a lot. This trip was really not in vain. Moreover, the main gains from the battle with the Underworld Lord were the Death Martial Scripture and the Taoist robe from the mythological era. The Death Martial Scripture was the most core martial arts summary of the Netherworld Kingdom. Yi Shiwen could obtain many beneficial parts from it. Although he didn't learn it, he could also use it as a reference. This was also a very rare opportunity. As for the Taoist robe from the mythological era, it made Yi Shiwen want to study it very much. The mythological era was too vast and too mysterious. Unfortunately, the mythological era seemed to have disappeared without a trace overnight. In that era, there was also more than one Emperor Lord. There were many experts. Many of them were innate gods with unimaginable strength. Yi Shiwen didn't know whether there was a disparity between the experts of the Emperor Lord level. However, the gods of the mythological era weren't just a little stronger than the gods of the same realm later on if they were only ordinary gods. There was also a legend that said that these special abilities were unique to those innate gods. They were born with these special abilities. They were bestowed by the heavens. They weren't acquired through cultivation. Later on, the cultivation system also borrowed the system created by those innate gods. They started to cultivate with the body of an ordinary person. Later on, the martial arts civilization came into being. and some of their abilities were also passed down along with their bloodlines. These were the so-called magical powers. There were people who possessed strange abilities in every race. There were also ancient humans among the human race. They were a completely different race from the human race. They were born with magical powers that ordinary people couldn't even imagine. However, martial arts were still the main focus of the current world. Those who possessed magical powers were outstanding existences wherever they went. Yi Shiwen was naturally confident in his current level of cultivation, let alone the innate gods. Even the demon gods born from the chaos might not be able to surpass all of them. However, the martial arts he practiced wasn't any weaker than them. It was just that he had only practiced for a short period of time. However, he was still very interested in the matters of the mythological era. Yi Shiwen casually arranged a large array and took out the death martial scripture. His eyes were like torches as he scanned through the death martial scripture. Countless information was analyzed in an instant. If Yi Shiwen had obtained this death martial scripture in the past, then he certainly wouldn't have been able to understand it so quickly. However, with his current cultivation, many things were like marinated tofu as he read along the way. Yi Shiwen was able to understand it very quickly and understand it very well. Countless information flashed through his mind. These information gradually began to condense in Yi Shiwen's eyes. For a whole 10 years, Yi Shiwen didn't move at all. He just kept looking at the death martial scripture. In the beginning, the word death slowly appeared in front of him. Later on, the word death became clearer and clearer. The word death began to emit the power of death, turning the surrounding space into a kingdom of death. This showed that Yi Shiwen's research on the power of death was getting deeper and deeper. In fact, it had gradually reached an unfathomable level. In the past, Yi Shiwen had come into contact with some of the laws of death back in the abyss of death. However, he only had a slight understanding of them. This death martial scripture, on the other hand, contained the true essence of death. It was also the foundation of the Netherworld Kingdom. The difference between the two was naturally incomparable. They couldn't be compared on the same level. Most importantly, the level of this death martial scripture was very high. Yi Shiwen was able to gain some insights just by looking at an emperor's martial art of the same level. Not to mention, Ming Di was a super expert of the fourth realm. Chapter 2985. The gap between each realm and the Sovereign Emperor realm was like the difference between heaven and earth. It couldn't be calculated with logic. Yi Shiwen had been able to break through to the second realm in such a short period of time, and even reach the peak. He himself thought so as well. Many sovereign emperors have been stuck in the first realm for hundreds of thousands of years without breaking through. Ming Di had already reached the fourth realm many years ago. In terms of comprehension of the Great Tao, it was above Yi Shiwen. Therefore, the death martial scripture that Ming Di had created was naturally extremely precious. Although the Tao of death wasn't the same as the path he had taken, the essence of the Great Tao was similar. After studying the death martial scripture for 10 years, Yi Shiwen's comprehension of the Great Tao had reached another level. Originally, it was difficult for someone at his level to comprehend the laws of the third realm. To him, the laws of the third realm should have been a little far away. But through the death martial scripture, he had comprehended many martial arts that were above the second realm. Yi Shiwen was able to analyze the mysterious space. Even at his current realm, the mysterious space still had an obvious effect on him. This made Yi Shiwen realize that this mysterious space wasn't as simple as he had originally guessed. In fact, it might even be an existence that surpassed the Emperor realm. The condensation of the word death represented that Yi Shiwen's comprehension of the power of death had reached a new peak. If this word death was obtained by an ordinary person, they could also reach a shocking level in a short period of time. So this is the third realm. I understand now. My understanding of the third realm has reached another level. Yi Shiwen finally opened his eyes. He had finally seen through some of the mysteries of the third realm. The harvest this time was indeed great. The middle yellow plum could increase his strength, but the death martial scripture could increase his understanding of the Great Tao. The two complemented each other. and Yi Shiwen had the confidence to break through to the third realm. Thinking back, breaking through to the second realm seemed to be just around the corner. In the blink of an eye, he was about to break through to the third realm, the 9 realms of the Sovereign Emperor realm, and he didn't know how long he would have to climb. Every step he took was like cutting a mountain to open a path that no one had ever walked before. Perhaps the more paths he opened, the higher the chances of a future Sovereign Emperor appearing. As for that mythological Taoist robe, it was sealed within the space within his body. He wasn't in a hurry to study it because he wanted to attempt a breakthrough. Once he broke through to the third realm, his position in the universe would be completely solidified. No one would be able to challenge him. Even if it was an exception like the Dark Lord, he would only be an exception. Under normal circumstances, he would not have any opponents. However, Yi Shiwen still instructed Yi Mo and the others before going into closed-door training. He reminded them to be careful. He was currently in the Divine Court. However, there were many things that he couldn't attend to during closed-door training. Most importantly, he didn't know if that person would attack again, because he was very clearly aware that that person was probably constantly paying attention to the myriad of worlds in the universe, and that person might attack again at any moment. He wasn't afraid of any other accidents. The only thing he was afraid of was that mysterious existence making another move. If that happened, the entire Divine Court would be destroyed. The news that the Martial Sovereign was going into closed-door cultivation soon spread throughout the universe. However, by this time, everyone was already used to it. It was impossible for the Martial Sovereign to have so much free time to deal with the affairs of the myriad of worlds all day long. Most of the Emperors would also be in closed-door training most of the time. Moreover, it was naturally a good thing that there was no longer a shadow above everyone's head. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of years had passed since the Martial Sovereign's closed-door training. During these hundreds of years, the myriad of worlds had slowly recovered from the devastation caused by the Dark Lord's rampage. In addition to the previous chaos of the heavenly race, the myriad of worlds had gradually recovered to its peak at this time, even though the Martial Sovereign had become an emperor for many years. In these hundreds of years, another major event had occurred. That was, someone had become an emperor. No one knew this person. However, not long after he had become an emperor, everyone had found out his identity and origin. This person was known as the Ice Emperor. He had an ice attribute martial art. He could freeze the entire universe with one move. His strength was so high that it was terrifying. However, the Ice Emperor wasn't a person of this era. In fact, he wasn't even from the ancient era. He was terrifyingly ancient, and there were even some old antiques who had existed since the first War of Defiance of the Heavens that could only barely recall who he was. This person was already a rogue cultivator expert during the First War of Resistance. He had become famous very early on. However, after the First War of Resistance, he disappeared without a trace. Now that they thought about it, he must have hidden himself and found a place to do closed-door training. From the First War of Resistance, he was already an expert of the quasi-emperor level. He had been in closed-door training since then. Finally, when the world confinement period was over, he emerged as a real emperor. How could this kind of forbearance not be frightening and frightening? There were even rumors that the Ice Emperor wasn't someone from the First War of Resistance. Instead, he was a figure from the mythological era. Therefore, he was already very famous during the First War of Resistance. Such a rumor was even more shocking. After all, it meant that the Ice Emperor had truly experienced countless eras. He was an old antique who couldn't be any older. The Ice Emperor wasn't the first person to become an emperor in these years. Therefore, it didn't cause as great a commotion as before. However, those old antiques seemed to have been injected with stimulants and were greatly encouraged. Regardless of whether it was DNI, Yi Shiwen, or the Dark Lord who had become emperors in these years, they were all influential figures of the current era. There wasn't a single old antique among them. Therefore, many rumors pointed out that only those young supreme experts of the current era could become emperors. Those old antiques had experienced many storms and possessed profound skills. However, it was impossible for them to become emperors. How could those old antiques be willing to accept this? One must know that they had also been young supreme experts of heaven's pride not so long ago. However, they had gradually become old antiques as time passed, who didn't have a time when their youth was soaring. Moreover, the Ice Emperor's ascension to Emperor had given them a theoretical basis. The ascension to Emperor wasn't directly related to time. Although it still depended on luck, there wasn't any such restriction. Time was even more pressing for those who were aspiring to become emperors. It had only been a few years since the confinement period. However, two emperors had become emperors one after the other. It was tantamount to becoming emperors in such a long time. Under such circumstances, how could they not be anxious when they knew that the future would be the era of emperors? However, this kind of thing couldn't be rushed even if they were anxious. Time was still ticking away. After the Ice Emperor had become emperor, he had quickly recruited a large number of experts to serve him. He had established the Ice Palace. The Ice Emperor had originally been a rogue cultivator. However, he had become an emperor now. Therefore, he could establish the immortal emperor's inheritance. Therefore, he naturally wasn't a rogue cultivator anymore. Not everyone in the world had submitted to Yi Shiwen's subordinates. The Ice Emperor was also an emperor. So, many people naturally wanted to become the meritorious ministers of the Ice Emperor. They wanted to soar to the sky in one fell swoop. Therefore, many forces were quickly recruited. For a time, the world seemed to have entered a situation where two emperors coexisted. The Ice Emperor didn't make any move to bring disaster to the world. Therefore, it seemed to be peaceful. The Ice Palace and the Divine Court had also become the most prominent inheritance in this world. However, everyone understood that the Divine Court was the leader in terms of foundation and the strength of the two emperors. The Ice Palace couldn't compete with the Divine Court. Yi Shiwen had killed so many emperors in a row. Everyone naturally understood his strength. Even the Ice Emperor didn't dare to extend his hand too far into the territory of the Divine Court. He was also an emperor, but there was a big gap between his strength and Yi Shiwen's. Originally, all this was considered obvious. However, after he had truly become emperors, he understood how big the gap was between him who had just become emperors in the first realm and Yi Shiwen who was in the second realm. Therefore, on the surface, the Ice Palace still tolerated the Divine Court. However, in fact, no one cared whether the Ice Emperor was dissatisfied with all this. In this world, there were strong and weak people. It was a very normal thing. If the Ice Emperor had become emperors at other times, he would have been the supreme ruler of the world. However, he had encountered a tough guy like Yi Shiwen, who couldn't be calculated with common sense. This was fate. But even so, there were still many people who were envious and jealous of him. Because even the emperor who was suppressed by Yi Shiwen wasn't someone who could be easily achieved. Until now, there were only two emperors in the world. This was already honorable and high up. The Martial Emperor and the Ice Empress coexisted. Everyone had thought that the situation would continue like this. However, on this day, a terrifying aura suddenly erupted from the Divine Court, which had calmed down due to the Ice Palace's sudden appearance. The entire world seemed to be enveloped by the aura, and all living creatures had to prostrate themselves and tremble in the terrifying aura. Everyone rushed in the direction of the Divine Court. They saw an old figure sitting in the universe's galaxy above the Divine Court. He was looking at the sky alone. Countless death auras were surrounding his body as if it had formed a kingdom of death. That's the Martial Emperor. How is it possible? How can the Martial Emperor become so old? Everyone couldn't believe it. That figure was too old. His hair and beard were all white. His figure was stooped. If he wasn't floating above the galaxy, many people would believe that he was an ordinary old man. And it turned out to be the wise and invincible Martial Emperor. Chapter 2986. How is this possible? No one believed that this was the invincible Martial Emperor. One should know that they were all deities, transcending beyond the three realms and the five elements. For them, they might fall, but for them, aging was something that was too far away. It was so far away that he couldn't even remember it. Not to mention that he was a sovereign emperor-level expert. He was completely isolated from aging. Even if most warriors looked old, it was just their appearance. In fact, their bodies were still very vigorous. However, the martial emperor was different. They could feel a kind of aging and deathly aura surrounding the body of the martial emperor. Generally, only people who were on the verge of death would have such a strong, deathly aura. However, it was present in the body of the martial emperor. What was going on? Could it be that the battle between the martial emperor and the Dark Lord left a wound that was hard to heal? Many people thought about it. It seemed that they could only think of this reason. After all, how could such a powerful sovereign emperor-level expert become like this under normal circumstances? Yi Shiwen had shown extraordinary strength in the battle many years ago. He had suppressed the Dark Lord all the way. Under normal circumstances, it should be impossible for him to be seriously injured. However, the matter of the sovereign emperor level was too far away for them. Perhaps it was not something that they could speculate at all. Or perhaps he has gone mad while practicing martial arts? That seemed to be the only thing that everyone could guess. Yi Shiwen was sitting cross-legged on the divine court. He was motionless. However, the deathly aura on his body was getting stronger and stronger. In particular, many people of the divine court were shouting. However, they couldn't help in such a situation. Martial Emperor, everyone's heart was trembling. They were worried for him. In particular, many experts of the divine court couldn't bear it. They didn't want to see such a martial emperor. But what is the martial emperor doing? Many people were also asking. They didn't know what Yi Shiwen was doing. A tyrannical gaze swept across half of the universe and landed on the divine court's paper. An icy cold will cause everyone to shiver. Ice Emperor. It's the Ice Emperor. Could it be that the martial emperor wants to challenge the Ice Emperor here? Many people had this type of misgivings, not daring to imagine what would happen if two emperors fought like this again. Just how terrifying of a thing would it be? It was as if the events of many years ago were repeating themselves. Yi Shiwen's vitality was gradually declining, and it seemed as if he would die in the next second. However, he was still floating in the void, and he didn't seem to have swallowed any life-prolonging divine pills. Just when everyone was wondering what Yi Shiwen was going to do, an incomparably powerful aura exploded in the galaxy. It descended from the sky and blasted towards the old Yi Shiwen. Who dares to attack a martial emperor? Many experts of the divine court were furious. Yi Shiwen had made outstanding military exploits ever since he had attained enlightenment. He had pacified the rebellion of the heavenly race and the corpse calamity. It could be said that his prestige was illustrious. He was respected by all races. So, who would dare to attack him? Even the Ice Emperor, who had become an emperor, didn't dare to disrespect Yi Shiwen. Even if there were many emperors, he was still the master of everything. At the same time, Yi Shiwen's blood and qi began to weaken even more, and under this attack, he appeared even more pale and powerless. Martial Emperor, everyone was trembling, and revealed a look of reluctance. However, this attack was too powerful, and it was not something they could compare with. That peerless aura traversed the sky, and it was definitely not a battle they could participate in. Boom! This attack fell on Yi Shiwen's body, and the time robe instantly erupted. The power of time soared into the sky and blocked this fatal attack, not letting them be killed alive. Humph! Yi Shiwen snorted coldly, and the cold intent even penetrated the entire universe. As expected of the only existence after the Qin Emperor who was able to prove his Tao during the confinement period. Even if your qi and blood have deteriorated to such an extent, it's really admirable that you're still able to block my attack. But even so, you still have to die. A figure slowly emerged in the void. His whole body was shining brightly, and he emitted a treasure light that filled the sky. He was dazzling like an ancient divine mountain that soared into the sky. Everyone's breathing completely stopped, as if someone was strangling their necks with both hands. There was actually an emperor in this world, and this person was obviously not Ice Emperor. Many people went to visit Ice Emperor after he became an emperor, so they were very clear about what Ice Emperor was like. This was definitely not Ice Emperor, but compared to Ice Emperor, he seemed to be stronger. Where did this person come from? How dare he come to find trouble with a martial emperor? From ancient times until now, it seemed like no one had heard of this person's name. Otherwise, how could they not know anything about him? This person was handsome, and he wore an imperial robe. He was extremely powerful, and his will penetrated everything, sweeping in all directions. Who is this? There are actually so many hidden emperor in this world. Didn't they say that all the emperor in this world have left or died? Could it be an emperor who has been hiding for a long time? Many descendants of the immortal emperor's inheritance looked at each other. This person was obviously not their ancestor. Otherwise, how could they not know anything about him? Only the two rulers of the martial sect, true Lord Fire Dragon, and a middle-aged monk who was surrounded by treasures, could not help but widen their eyes when they saw this scene. If anyone noticed, they would know that this middle-aged monk was actually the ancestor of the Western Paradise who had not appeared for many years, Grandmaster Bajie. He and true Lord Fire Dragon were once the left and right arms of the Qin Emperor. They accompanied the Qin Emperor in his conquest of the world and established an invincible reputation. However, ever since the Qin Emperor disappeared, other than true Lord Fire Dragon, who was still managing the martial sect, Grandmaster Bajie had already secluded himself in the Western Paradise. He painstakingly studied the Buddhist Dharma, hoping to one day attain the Tao and become a Buddha. This time, he also sensed an unprecedented change in the world. That was why he came out of his endless seclusion and saw this scene the moment he came out. They're here again. It's them. It's really them again. True Lord Fire Dragon's face was filled with unimaginable shock. There was even a hint of fear in his expression. It's really them. Grandmaster Bajie narrowed his eyes. His expression was extremely solemn. It's been so many years. After hiding for so many years, they still appeared. It seems like the martial emperor is in trouble. I'm afraid this calamity won't be easy to overcome. The martial emperor's chi and blood are vigorous, and he is at his peak. Those rascals might not dare to cause trouble. However, the martial emperor is currently at his lowest point. This is the best time to kill him, true Lord Fire Dragon said. He still had respect for the martial emperor, who was a junior. In this world, other than the martial emperor of the past, only the current martial emperor could make him feel this way. Both of them had become martial emperors during the confinement period. Their achievements were limitless, and they had pacified many wars. They were both extraordinary figures. These rascals hid far away to avoid the Qin Emperor back then. Now, they still dare to come out. It seems like they are fully prepared. Sigh, the calamity of the martial emperor is really difficult. Our martial sect can't just stand by and watch. Grandmaster Bajie said, I haven't moved for a long time. Even if the other party is an imperial emperor, I still have to fight. True Lord Fire Dragon said to the disciples beside him, Yes, tell the martial sect to prepare for battle. These people are old enemies. Didn't we old guys hold on all these years just for this day? This person is in the distant ice palace. An astonishing will was constantly paying attention to the direction of the divine court. When it saw the appearance of that person, it could not help but let out a cry of surprise. Could it be? It seemed to have thought of something. It had lived for so long that many of the world's secrets were no longer secrets. It had lived for so long that it had experienced many imperial emperors. When it saw this person, it was a little strange at first. However, it soon felt a little familiar, as if it had seen him somewhere before. Suddenly, the Ice Emperor's expression changed. It seemed like he suddenly remembered. If it was really the person in his memory, then it would be big trouble. The martial emperor would be in big trouble. Those people are still alive. I'm afraid this battle is inevitable. He wasn't convinced of the martial emperor's strength. However, he knew that he would have to face the storm head-on without the martial emperor. He knew what kind of situation it would be. If the heavenly race was the great enemy of the 10,000 worlds, then this person was the great enemy of the imperial emperors. It seems that there are many people in this world who are ready to make trouble. Yi Shiwen sighed slightly as he looked at this great enemy who was in high spirits. "You are Bao Huang?" Yi Shiwen looked at this person and slowly and calmly said his name. "You know my name?" That person felt a little strange. He exposed an astonished expression on his face. I know. How could I not know? Your body is a magic weapon from the ancient times. Later, because of a lucky chance, it allowed you to attain the Tao and seize the opportunity to attain the Tao. It only appeared for a short time, and the last time it appeared should be when you besieged the Qin Emperor. Yi Shiwen calmly explained the origin of this treasure emperor. Everyone was in an uproar for a while. Some old antiques vaguely remembered that there had been such a person. He had suppressed all the outstanding heroes on the road to becoming an emperor and had seized the opportunity to become an emperor. However, he had disappeared later on, so he was soon forgotten in everyone's memory. What was even more terrifying was that everyone now knew that this person had besieged Emperor Qin in the past. This was terrible. Emperor Qin's strength was ranked in the top few among the imperial emperors in the historical records. This person had dared to besiege and kill Emperor Qin. His courage was simply too big. Chapter 2987. The remaining 3 people are all here. The pawns that person placed in this world have finally come out. It's a good time to kill them all. Yi Shiwen said slowly. The Kurfürst Road is indeed a scourge. Yi Shiwen said, "It seems that I was right to destroy the Kurfürst Road." As soon as he appeared, it was as if everything in the world was under his control. His dominance crushed the king's way. Everything had to surrender to his martial arts. Even after 100,000 years, I can still wield weapons and kill people. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said slowly. His voice sounded a bit old, as if he had really been forced to such a point. "If I'm not wrong, you should be an overlord. If it wasn't for the opportunity to become an emperor, you might have had the chance to break through the confinement period and become an emperor. Unfortunately, you gave it up and became someone else's lackey. That's all you can achieve in this life." As soon as this person appeared, he mocked and ridiculed Yi Shiwen, completely looking down on him. Among the 9 emperors on the Kurfürst Road, Emperor Qin killed 5 of them in the battle to become the emperor. In addition to the inverse emperor that I once killed, there are only 3 left now, and all of them are here. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and slowly revealed a shocking fact. He did not care. As soon as the Ice Emperor spoke, many people heaved a sigh of relief. At least the Ice Emperor did not come to rob and kill the Martial Emperor. Martial Emperor, I'm so disappointed that you've become so old. It's only 20,000 years, and you've already become like this. Can you still use your Martial Emperor's seal? I don't need you to care about my current situation. Martial Emperor, don't you think you're meddling too much? The Overlord said coldly. What do you have to fight with us now? You're just an old man with 1 foot in the grave. It was just that battle was too far away from the present. So many people had even forgotten about it. Thank you for your help, Ice Emperor. They're just a bunch of clowns. There's no need for Ice Emperor to take action. How about Ice Emperor help me guard this place? Since when were there so many hidden emperors that they did not know about? Obviously, the Overlord and the Bao Emperor were in cahoots. At the mention of this, the Tyrant Emperor's expression changed slightly, but it quickly became cold again. Jade Emperor. Yi Shiwen slowly spat out these 2 words. Now everyone is here. All of you are attacking a martial emperor. Aren't you a little too shameless? It hadn't been a long time since Yi Shiwen had become an emperor. However, the whole world had surrendered to him, and the 4 seas had become peaceful. Perhaps there wouldn't be another opportunity in the future if he was allowed to continue like this. Then, Emperor Qin would reappear, and he would become another Emperor Qin. Now that he thought about it, it was these people who participated in the siege against the Qin Emperor. Although you're also an imperial monarch, do you think you have any chance of winning against me? Everyone exclaimed with shock and almost fainted. Someone had placed a chess piece in the universe, and this chess piece was actually an imperial monarch. This was simply astounding. Kill me? Ha ha ha. Yi Shiwen, do you think that you are still the same Yi Shiwen who was at the peak of his strength? With your current state, Do you think that you can go against the heavens and surpass us? The tyrant emperor laughed heartily, as if he didn't care about Yi Shiwen's wishful thinking. That's right, martial emperor. Perhaps you really are a genius and have reached the critical moment of transformation. However, do you think that you still have a chance to pass this trial? The Jade Emperor finally spoke. His voice was gentle, but there was a terrifying killing intent in it. However, relatively speaking, there was still hope. The evaluation of the Tyrant Emperor seemed to be much higher than that of the Bao Emperor. The three of them had joined forces to besiege Yi Shiwen. Naturally, they were fully prepared. They had already calculated that Yi Shiwen's vitality had truly declined to the limit. Although they didn't know the cause of this, it was a fact. This was an excellent opportunity. Otherwise, as time passed, the probability of them killing Yi Shiwen would decrease. Yi Shiwen's strength was too strong, and his rate of improvement was too fast. He was also an emperor. Naturally, he had his own pride. In addition, Yi Shiwen was already in such a state. If he was still frightened by Yi Shiwen, then he really didn't need to mingle in the world anymore. No wonder the Qin Emperor was so obsessed with the Kurfürst Road. It turned out that there was such a reason behind it. Many people cried out in alarm. Another imperial monarch. It was actually another imperial monarch. Even though they were all emperor, there weren't many people who could enter his eyes. You're old. Although I don't know what's going on, but today will be the day of your death. A domineering voice came from the void. Then, a tall and strong figure appeared. It was a man with a domineering face. It was the Ice Emperor. Greed flashed in his eyes. Just as everyone speculated, those who became emperors on the Kurfürst Road with the opportunity to become emperors were naturally more likely to become emperors than ordinary people. One must know that only emperors were qualified to play chess in the universe. Only true emperors could suppress all directions and be invincible. However, the person mentioned by Yi Shiwen could use emperors as chess pieces. How powerful must he be? Everyone was speechless. This was yet another peerless character. Since when were there so many sovereign emperors? Emperors are indeed domineering. However, maybe you've really reigned supreme in the world for too long. Do you really think that I don't have the confidence to kill you this time? Bao Huang looked at Yi Shiwen coldly. His expression was quite unfriendly. They were both emperors, but he was belittled by Yi Shiwen to this extent. How could he be in a good mood? Yi Shiwen slowly stood up. The vitality in his body didn't decline any further. It seemed as if it was forcibly locked by a force. In the distance, a terrifying thought swept across the sky. A figure accompanied by endless ice crystals appeared in front of everyone. However, these people were extremely daring. They dared to attack anyone. However, everyone suddenly came back to their senses. It was true that these people were extremely daring. However, weren't they also emperors? I don't care if you want the martial emperor's origin of the Great Way. However, I want his martial emperor's seal. If I can devour his martial emperor's seal, my strength will undergo a complete transformation, and I will rush into the second realm. Bao Huang said. Many people recalled that Emperor Qin had almost died in the battle when he had become an emperor. He had suffered a terrifying sneak attack. No one had clearly seen what had happened at that time. Emperor Qin had also sustained serious injuries when the battle had ended. In fact, Emperor Qin had almost died since he had become an emperor not long ago. Otherwise, the situation would have been even worse. 3 emperors were already terrifying enough. But the situation would have taken a turn for the worse if Ice Emperor had joined the battle. Defy the natural order? Tell me, do I need to defy the natural order? I've killed many powerful enemies in the past. That's called defying the natural order. Killing you people is like killing chickens and dogs. Why do I need to defy the natural order? Yi Shiwen stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He coldly said, "It seems that you're not completely clueless." A figure slowly emerged. It was a jade-like figure. It seemed as if this person had been cast from jade. His entire body was emitting an unimaginable radiance. Yi Shiwen raised his head and looked at him. He said, "Bao Huang, I hope you can still say such words when I kill you." Bao Huang slowly said, "Destroying the Kurfürst Road will be the worst decision you'll ever make." Pawn? Humph, Martial Emperor. Do you think you can still escape today? With the three of us joining hands, we can even fight you at your peak, let alone in your current state. From now on, there won't be a Martial Emperor. There will only be a corpse. Bao Huang looked at Yi Shiwen and coldly snorted. Humph, you're just a bunch of clowns. You didn't even obtain the throne by yourself. What qualifications do you have to appear in front of me? You're just like the Emperor and I, Yi Shiwen indifferently said. He didn't put Bao Huang in his eyes at all. Because of this, they had targeted the Emperor of Qin. Who would have thought that they would be defeated by the Emperor of Qin? Since then, they hadn't dared to come out during the era when the Emperor of Qin ruled the world. Only an imperial monarch would be able to conspire such an earth-shattering event. However, after they had become emperors, they discovered that it was too difficult for them to advance any further. It was as if they had encountered a terrifying imprisonment. In other words, this was the punishment of the heavens for their opportunism. They watched others advance step by step while they couldn't advance any further. So many years had passed, but he was still in the first realm. It seemed as if he would never be able to advance any further. Bao Huang's body emitted endless golden light, which illuminated hundreds of millions of miles. It seemed as if he was cast in gold. He was majestic and powerful. Yi Shiwen indifferently looked at Bao Huang. There was even a hint of disdain and ridicule in his eyes. Who was he? He was an invincible martial emperor who ruled over the heavens and 10,000 worlds. Who was qualified to be compared to him? Even if it's an old man with one foot in the grave, you still don't dare to face me alone, do you? Since you've come, then come out. Yi Shiwen chuckled and said. Now, Yi Shiwen's rise had made them see the birth of another emperor of Qin. They wouldn't have come out so easily if they hadn't confirmed that Yi Shiwen was about to die. Only then did everyone come to a realization. So there was actually such a thing hidden in this matter. It seemed as if one of them would appear from time to time. How long had it been? Yi Shiwen was already above them. He had completely surpassed their imagination. Such a character was definitely a great calamity. They couldn't let him live. Otherwise, the heavens and 10,000 worlds would surpass their imagination in the future. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.